Oh, I remember what I did. Oh, yeah. I had to change my screen size for my last stream because it was on, what's it? Streamlabs. In Streamlabs, the image is different than my normal screen capture program. So I was like, for some reason, we aren't showing up on screen. Like, what is going on? But now it is good. That is a very interesting lamp. I like it.
Oh, this one here?
Yeah.
Yeah, we wanted to go with something like kind of just more unique, kind of catch your eye. And I've always liked the industrial looks, so yeah,
Yeah, it definitely looks cool, like old miner stuff.
yeah. In fact, my wife and I went around and we replaced all of the lights and all of the fans in the house when we bought it. So
Oh,
it was
wow.
funny that the first one that we replaced, it took us like 3 hours. And then by the time we were doing the last one, we got it down to like 30 minutes, because we had never done one before. But
Yep.
by then,
Practice makes perfect.
yeah. So fan install services, by the way, we'll sell those.
Oh, nice, nice. All right, it looks like we are live. So, Matt, thanks for coming on. Really appreciate you taking the time to have a conversation with me. Would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself before we get started?
Sure. So my name is Matt Bilyeu. I was raised in a Christian home. Deconverted to atheism around 17, 18 or so, something like that. Mostly
Sure. So, my
because
name.
of what I perceive to be just an absence of evidence for Christianity. And then I reconverted to Christianity a few years later when I found said evidence. And those experiences really gave me kind of just a passion for evidences, for Christian evidences. And so I got my bachelor's degree in religion from Luther Rice University and my master's degree in apologetics. And now I serve on a volunteer team with Reasonable Faith. So if you write into Dr. Craig, and he gets a lot of emails, if he can't handle it, then they'll route it to my team, and we'll, get a response to you. And then over the last couple of months, I've started kind of a new project where I'm kind of hosting discussions between Christians and non-Christians, kind of a group discussion format. And if anybody's interested in that, you can find out more at coffeeshopapologetics.com.
Awesome. Yeah. So, is that in person only, or is there an online thing for that?
Oh, online. Yeah, purely online. It's through I use a Discord server for that. So
Oh, nice, nice. Awesome. I'd
yeah, I
definitely be
can't be
interested.
bothered with a commute.
How often do you guys meet and chat?
So it's relatively new. I mean, I've been doing like one a month, one every 3 weeks, 4 weeks, something like that. Um, so yeah, just a lot of things going on trying to build the channel, and so that takes time. And so to like prep to have a discussion, it's just taking a little bit longer. But I do eventually hope to have different speakers and things like that. Maybe even like a mentorship program for people who are learning apologetics, kind of attached on the side, stuff like that. But for now, it's just group discussions on different topics. So
Awesome. That sounds really interesting. I'd love to hang out sometime in one of those if
yeah,
you're open to that.
yeah, absolutely.
All right, cool. So I am an atheist, by which I mean I believe that there is no evidence of a God, and I think that naturalism better explains everything about the universe. Could you tell me some of the reasons you believe there are for believing in a God?
Sure. So one of the things that we interacted with that before was like rational oughts, like when you ought to believe something. And you can construct thought experiments where all of the evidence can be in favor of a claim, and you're still not rationally obligated to believe it. So what I don't want to try to do tonight is tell you what you have to believe or you're obligated to believe or what anybody has to believe. The best that I hope to do is just to show that my Christian convictions are rational. I'm not doing something that's irrational and coming to these conclusions, and that I think that the evidence lends to them. So
Yeah,
go
could
ahead.
you explain that more? Because you said um, all the evidence can indicate something, but you ought not to believe it or something. How does
Yeah,
that
yeah.
work?
So, for example, let's imagine that you are accused of a crime. Let's say it's like a murder or something like that. And they arrest you, they take you to court, and as they're laying out the evidence, they somehow have just a mountain of evidence. I mean, they have, you know, DNA evidence. They got your blood at the crime scene, victim's blood on a murder weapon in your house, just tons of evidence. And but you didn't do it. And so it can literally be where like all of the evidence is against you doing it, and still you're not rationally obligated to believe you did it. Right. I mean, you even if they have like a video, you would think, well, that video is doctored because I know I didn't do it. Um, and so there's some sort of quality in addition to evidence that causes there to be a rational ought. And you can do thought experiments in the other direction as well, where you're not obligated to believe something, or where you are obligated to believe something, even if there's not a lot of evidence. And so,
Well, I wouldn't count that as all the evidence, because if like you don't have a memory of the thing and you're being accused of doing it, I would say that that is evidence you did not do it. And so I think that would not all of the evidence would be indicative that you did it at that point. Like literally, if you had a memory of actually doing it and knew you did it, and all of the evidence indicated you did it, then all of the evidence would. But if you didn't, if you literally couldn't remember yourself doing it, I think that would be a piece of evidence that you didn't. So it wouldn't be literally all of the evidence indicates that you did it in that case.
all right. Yeah. I mean, maybe you're pushing the analogy a bit more than I meant to go with it. Basically, the point was just to show that there isn't evidence alone that can cause you to be obligated to believe something. That there's something more than just the evidence. Because even if you took that, then there'd be like one person's testimony, your own, that you didn't do it. But whether you like the thought experiment or not, I think that there's a question of when do rational obligations obtain, and it's not obvious to me exactly what the standards are. So all that I'm bringing that up to say is like I'm not trying to tell you that you have to believe something or that anybody in the audience has to believe anything. All that I'm trying to say is like, well, look, at least understand that Christianity is a rational option. For somebody who looks at the evidence, it's rational for them to come to Christian conclusions.
Right. So I
So,
mean, when I hear that, to me, I intuitively disagree, because when I say the if all of the evidence indicates a conclusion, then I would say by definition you ought to believe it in that case. If there were odds, I don't believe there are objective odds, but you can believe whatever you want is my position. But
okay.
if all of the evidence does indicate something, you should believe it. And in your analogy, all of the evidence didn't indicate something. So like if you literally don't have a memory of yourself doing it, that is a good piece of evidence that you didn't do it, kind of a thing, or is at least a piece of evidence against the hypothesis. So I don't understand your statement there, because it seems like your example doesn't match your statement. It may not be very pertinent to our conversation, but to me that seems very confusing to say that it's a possibility that all of the evidence could indicate a conclusion. It's not rational to believe it. That doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah. Okay. So it sounds like we agree. You don't think that there are rational lots, and so you don't think that people ought to believe things. I don't have a robust standard for rational lots, so I'm not going to say that they obtain for our conversation. So I think we both agree that no rational oughts are obtaining for our conversation. Is that fair?
Oh yeah, sure. So I can say, yeah, you can believe whatever you want if it makes you feel good. I'm totally open with that. But I would say that if all of the evidence indicates the conclusion, and you say, I don't believe the evidence or something, I think that's be more irrational. Not an ought, but irrational.
Yeah. So like in our example, like if they had the murder weapon at your house, it might be irrational to believe that the murder weapon wasn't at your house. But yeah, this is kind of going. It's really only tangentially. The whole point of all of that was just to say I'm not saying you have to believe anything, and we agree on that.
Sure.
So how we get there, I think we're arriving at the same destination.
Sure.
So the way that I would do that is basically I would just kind of show my path, my path of reasoning from observations through evidence and all that, and the conclusions that I draw from it. And then you might think of that like a highway. And then if you raise an objection, then that's like an off ramp, saying like, well, look, I don't think that what you referred to leads to that destination, and so I think this off ramp's better. And then at that point, you have to choose between, which sounds better to you, the highway or the off ramp. And the best that I can do at that point is tell you why I don't choose the off ramp. But like you said, ultimately, it's up to you what you're going to believe. I can't control that. But I hope at least you'll be able to say, well, look, I wouldn't stay on the highway at this point, but I can understand why you're staying on the highway. Fair enough?
Yep.
So the first argument that I would suggest is a version of the moral argument. And that's that there's an observation that we perceive moral facts. The hypothesis is that these moral facts are objective. The prediction is that a morally perfect person exists as the foundation for these facts. And the verification is that in tandem with other observations from other arguments, we'll predict this being as God, and you'll meet him someday in this life or the next.
What was the confirmation there?
You'll meet God.
So it's a prediction that hasn't been confirmed yet?
Yeah. So sort of like in your conversation with Tom Levi on, I think it was February 12th, something like that. You used as your confirmation that we'll meet moral aliens for
Sure.
your reason for believing that objective moral values exist. That was your verification, is that we'll meet moral aliens. We haven't yet, but nonetheless, that's something that would be predicted by the hypothesis that you shared at that time.
Yeah. So mine's purely a hypothesis. I don't claim I have any evidence for it being true. I think it's true. I like it being true, but I don't have any confirmatory evidence yet. So are you saying the same thing about God in that case, that there has been no confirmation of it yet?
I'm saying that you haven't met God yet. I'm sure. I'm fine with that.
So that wouldn't really be evidence indicative of a God yet until we actually meet him.
So the hypothesis predicts the existence of God. And for example, we've never met a black hole. We've never seen a black hole. We've never directly received empirical evidence from a black hole because nothing escapes a black hole. What we
Uh,
have is we have inferences from evidence to the existence of the black hole that we've never encountered. And so that's what I'm suggesting here is we have evidence through our moral perception. Now we can disagree on what that's evidence for, but that's the data. We have data in our perception, and that data predicts the existence of a morally perfect being.
well, we predicted that if black holes exist, there would be these massive gravitational fields that would suck stars in them, and we can literally directly observe that. So black
Mm-hmm.
holes have been empirically demonstrated. We have actually literally seen a black hole. There are pictures of it that has happened. So
Well, light can't escape a black hole, so you wouldn't capture it on a photo.
right, but we can see the light and radiation going around the black hole and what happens to it. So we can literally measure its mass. So we can measure
Yeah,
the mass of each and every individual black hole. We know it's a black hole. So we've literally seen them. Yeah, we don't need to literally see the event
but
horizon
we
to see a
haven't
black
literally
hole.
seen them. What
We
you said is that we haven't seen them. We've seen evidence around them that points to the black hole.
Well, that's like a neutrino. So neutrinos, we can't see them because they're too small, but we can literally see the
Right.
effects they have, which no other thing has that effect. So we
Yeah.
have empirically demonstrated black holes. We have not in any way. There's no analogy to morality there. So
Yeah,
there's
I'm not
nothing.
here to tell you that we shouldn't believe in black holes. What I'm saying is that the process of taking observations and inferring something from those observations that's implied by those observations is a reasonable thing to do.
Right, but I'm not seeing the connection here. So in black holes, they made a prediction with empirical verifiability, which was then confirmed through observation. Morality, you've made a prediction we will see God, but there's no verification there. There's no analogy between those two, as far as I can tell.
Well, I mean, like I said, you said that moral aliens was enough for you to call it a hypothesis and say that it had predictions and things. So I certainly think if you're allowed moral aliens, then I'm allowed God.
Well,
Um,
sure. I mean, but I'm not saying my prediction has been confirmed yet. So mine has not been confirmed. So I'm
so
saying
you
that
weren't presenting it as true.
no, it's prediction that I hope is true in the future. So it's something I don't
Yeah.
know. So if like in the case of a black hole, it's been confirmed, it's been proven. Yes, those are black holes. There's not another option there. Yes, we've empirically demonstrated those are black holes. With morality, we've empirically demonstrated nothing. It's a prediction that I hope to empirically demonstrate in the future. So we don't have any confirmatory evidence of it. It's just a hypothesis. And
Yeah.
so
So you could take that route. That's an off ramp. Is I unless I have some sort of empirical verification of it, then I'm not going to believe it. You could take that off ramp. The reason why I wouldn't take that off ramp is because that prevents us from being able to acknowledge a lot of things that we do know. So, for example, moral values. I mean, we know that what's happening in Ukraine right now is evil, um, and it seems to me that if my epistemology, I don't want to be in a position where I'd have to deny what's obvious since it's in front of my face. And so you could take that off ramp, but I hope you can understand that like I don't feel like I'm obligated to accept that evidentiary standard because I think it's just the bar is way too high and it ends up ruling out too much. Because what we want to do is I've been reliably informed that what we want our evidence to do is to separate the land of imagination from reality. And so
sounds really
that
good.
kind
I
of goes both.
wonder who said that.
Yeah, some philosopher somewhere. And so that goes both ways though, right? And so we don't want anything that's in the land of imagination actually like we bring it into reality and it's actually just imagination. But we also don't want to leave things in the land of imagination that are a part of reality. And so we want an epistemology that's going to be able to navigate those two. At least I do. Some people are satisfied to leave just everything in the land of imagination. I mean, you've got solipsists who say that even the external world doesn't exist. And so people can go that route. That's an off ramp that people can take. But I hope that people can realize that I'm at least rational for.
Your
Sorry, it's
phone?
about my daughter. Oh, sorry.
No problem.
It was a text about, anyway, sorry about that. So I hope you'll realize, like,
She causing
even
trouble at
if you
school,
accept
beating
that,
people up.
what's that?
She causing trouble at school, beating people up at 3 years old.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. She's, the enforcer. So anyway, I hope you'll at least realize that why I don't accept that evidentiary standard. If you want to accept it, like you said, you can believe anything you want to believe. But I don't think that you would say that I'm obligated to accept that evidentiary standard.
Well, sure, but that wasn't the point I was making. The point I was making is that in black holes, they made a prediction and then the prediction was confirmed. So the evidence isn't the fact it makes a prediction, it's the fact the prediction was confirmed after they made the prediction. So in the case of morality, I've made a prediction, but it's not evidence because it hasn't been confirmed yet. So in the same case of your model and my model, we haven't had our predictions confirmed. So the fact that we've made predictions isn't evidence of either
I've
of
had
our
mine
models.
confirmed.
What?
I've had mine confirmed.
Well, that's what I'm asking about. Because in the case of the black hole, they've already been confirmed. So what is the confirmatory thing that's happened to show us that our predictions have come true? Because you said your prediction was that we'll meet God after we die. I have not done that yet. That's not a
Well,
thing
you can
I've.
meet him in this life too.
Okay.
And so, I mean, I know that you don't believe that, you're an atheist, right? So you can't meet somebody who doesn't exist. But
That'll be
that
great
doesn't.
evidence for
Yeah, it
phenomenal.
would be. Well, and it was. And so, anybody who's in the audience, if you sincerely seek God and put your hope in Him, then you will meet Him. And so, there is a way to verify that in this life.
Well, I don't think that's fair because I think most atheists have genuinely sought Him and have not found anything. So I think that's like literally the consensus among atheists. We've all literally genuinely sought Him, and that's why we left the faith because He wasn't there.
Yeah, and that's what I said when I was an atheist too. But here we are.
Right. But I mean, I think we can literally empirically demonstrate, yeah, we have genuinely sought them. We can literally identify in the brain what genuine passion is and that we have genuine passion for that. So we can literally prove that false. Like, yes, we know for a fact. Like, it's kind of like your example with the murderer. If all of the evidence indicates that you're a murderer, but you know you didn't do it, we know we did genuinely seek and it didn't happen. So if that standard is true, then we've disproven God. We already know He doesn't exist because we genuinely sought to a greater extent. I mean, I'd say that atheists in many cases genuinely seek more so than the vast majority of Christians. So if what you're stating is true, then the fact that we have gone through that process to an extremely genuine extent and have not found God would completely disprove God if what you just said, that we would meet Him if we didn't genuinely passionately tried and did not, then that would seem to disprove God by your standard.
Yeah, so where we're at in the dialectic is that you've presented an objection about evidentiary standards, that the evidentiary standard is that it needs to have this empirical verification. And as
No,
I'd like,
that was not a part of anything I said. No.
okay, then what's your problem with saying that morality predicts a morally perfect being?
None. I don't have a problem with that at all. So my problem is that for a prediction to be evidence, it has to be confirmed. You have to confirm the prediction, not just make a prediction. So I can predict the lottery numbers for next month are 5, 7, 2, 12, 24, but that doesn't mean I'm a genius unless it actually happens. Until it happens, it's not evidence of anything. So
Yeah,
just making...
I'm serving notice that I don't accept that evidentiary standard. And I've explained why I don't accept it, and I don't think it's rational.
I'm not
You can
following.
accept it. I'm not telling you should accept it.
So
The standard of it doesn't count as evidence until it's verified.
if I predict the lottery numbers right now, let's just say I'm going to predict the lottery numbers. Are you going to accept me as a genius? And if before they actually happen?
I mean, if you can do that, then I will absolutely call you a genius. Sure, just give them to me. We'll close the chat so that I can win by myself.
Yeah.
And then.
But wait, would you believe I'm a genius before you won, or would you wait until after you won and probably doubt?
I'm not saying that verifying predictions isn't a good thing when you can do it. That's not what I'm objecting to. What I'm objecting to is that you can't count something as evidence without that. So my standard of evidence is that some piece of evidence X counts as evidence for hypothesis 1 over a counter hypothesis, hypothesis 2. So X counts as evidence for H1 over H2, if and only if X is more likely on H1 than on H2. And it counts as evidence. It may be weak evidence, it may be strong evidence, maybe conclusive, it may be inconclusive, but it would be evidence if it counts for one over the other.
Well, two things there. One, that's post hoc ergo propter hoc, literally a fallacy. So like if I said there's a gold brick on my table, and if I have a hypothesis there is a leprechaun in my basement who likes to make gold bricks, well, that would the gold brick would be more likely on that hypothesis than the hypothesis there's no leprechaun, and so given
if those
your
are the only two hypotheses, then sure, yeah, I'd rather believe a leprechaun put a brick on your table than it popped into existence out of nothing. But those aren't the only two hypotheses in that case.
right,
You have
so
different competing hypotheses.
right, so given your definition of evidence, that would be evidence of a leprechaun. So in order, you'd have to add to your definition.
Yes, it would. If the only two possible options are leprechaun or gold brick from nothing, poof, there it is, then yeah, I'm going to go with the leprechaun. Wouldn't you?
Well, no. So like if there's a hypothesis that I like gold bricks or whatever, the fact that I like gold bricks would have a lower probability to expect a gold brick on a table because not everyone can afford a gold brick. And so under a hypothesis of a leprechaun who has magic, who can always produce gold bricks, if such a leprechaun exists in my basement, then the probability of a gold brick existing on my table is 1. It's a very high probability. If I like gold bricks and I would buy one, the probability is very low because the probability of people being able to afford a gold brick is low because they're expensive. And so under the hypothesis of the leprechaun, the gold brick would be more likely. It's higher to be expected under the leprechaun hypothesis. So that if that's your standard of evidence, that's a bad standard of evidence.
So on that analogy, what you're putting in as a presupposition is that it's more likely that a leprechaun exists than you would scrounge enough money together to buy a gold brick.
No.
So I wouldn't agree that it's more likely on H1, the leprechaun, than on H2 that you somehow bought a gold brick.
It's more likely that you would see a gold brick under the hypothesis there is a leprechaun who creates gold bricks than under the hypothesis that a person who owns the house likes gold bricks. Because if there's a leprechaun, leprechauns can always create gold bricks. They are, you can sui generis produce gold bricks or whatever. But people can't because they need to make money. So the hypothesis, the problem here isn't the priors. The objection you brought up was called the problem of the priors. The priors of leprechauns is low, which is, I agree, that's why we don't accept them. But under your original definition of evidence, the Bayesian definition, the fact that we see a gold brick would be more expected under hypothesis where the gold brick appearing has a higher likelihood, which you can make up infinitely many possible explanations to make it a higher likelihood, like a magical leprechaun. And if there was a magical leprechaun, the likelihood of a gold brick is higher than if there is no magic leprechaun and I just like gold bricks because they're expensive. So given the Bayesian definition,
there's no causal connection between you liking gold bricks and there being a gold brick on your table. There would be a causal connection between you buying a gold brick and then putting it on your table, but you just liking something. I like Griffin, right? Which is some sort of eagle beast thing in Lord of the Rings. I think they're cool. That has no causal connection on griffins, right? I like cake, but there is no cake here, right? So like me liking something has no causal connection between it being there. There have to be other things like me acting to put it there. But merely liking something doesn't have a causal connection between you and that thing. It doesn't cause the thing. And so, yeah, I would say your H2 is essentially a gold brick poofing out of nothing. And so, yeah, if you're going to set it up that way to where you've got leprechaun places a gold brick or gold brick poofs out of nothing because there's no causal connection between the hypothesis and the gold brick, then sure. But the way I would actually respond to that is present hypothesis number 3. TJump's a huge thief and he stole a gold brick. He uses the pink hair to throw people off. That's how he gets away with it.
Right. So I'm comparing any natural means for me to acquire a gold brick from like Fort Knox or whatever, compared to the hypothesis there is a magic leprechaun who magicked a gold brick or whatever. In the Bayesian definition of evidence that you provided, the leprechaun has a higher explanatory power to explain why the gold brick is there because it's more likely that a gold brick would be there if a leprechaun existed. Since getting a gold brick is difficult here on Earth because they're very hard to get, it's unlikely any given person would be able to get a gold brick. But a leprechaun doesn't have that problem. So under the leprechaun hypothesis, the gold brick is more likely, it is more expected you would see a gold brick if a leprechaun existed. So the evidence is more expected if the hypothesis is true. Whereas it's less expected if the me stealing one is true, because that's a much difficult, less probable thing to occur.
Yeah, I mean, if you're stipulating that the leprechaun exists, then I mean, sure, we can stipulate things into existence. But like I said, I don't agree that it's more likely that there is a leprechaun that poofed a brick onto your table than that you stole a brick or went out and bought one or whatever. I mean, I don't agree that the evidence is more likely on the leprechaun hypothesis than on the. So yeah, I would, the way, that's how I would respond to that, is I would say that yeah, that does work into my framework for evidentiary standard, and it would put the leprechaun lower than you stealing a brick.
Well, it directly contradicts the definition of evidence you gave. That's the objection I'm having.
You're saying that it's more likely that the brick would exist on the leprechaun hypothesis than on the you stole a brick hypothesis.
Yes.
I disagree.
So the definition of evidence you gave is the Bayesian definition of evidence, that a piece of evidence is more likely if a hypothesis is true. It's more expected. This piece of evidence, F, I think is the letter you used, is more expected if my hypothesis is true. That means you assume the hypothesis is true, and if the evidence is there, you already see it. So that would mean you assume the leprechaun is true, your hypothesis. Would you expect to see the data that you see? Like the gold brick? Well, yes, obviously you would. And so given the definition of evidence you used, what you just said, which I agree with, I don't think the leprechaun is a better theory here. I agree that exactly for the reasons you said, but it directly contradicts what you called evidence. So,
yeah,
maybe
I don't think it does, for the reasons I've already explained. I don't think I can make it more clear why I don't think that's the case.
Well, I mean, I deductively proved it. So, I mean,
I don't think that I'm obligated to accept your evidentiary standard. And so that's why I wouldn't take that off ramp, is because I don't think that things are only evidence if they're confirmed empirically or if they're confirmed.
Well, again, I never said that. That's not a thing I ever said at any point. I'm not an empiricist. So my point here was an internal contradiction. You made a statement, which was your definition of evidence. Would you like to give it again? I'll write it down, and I can deductively prove that this is a contradiction in your position. It has nothing to do with my position. What is your definition of evidence? I'm gonna write this down.
Yeah, I mean, I said that X counts as evidence for H1 over H2 if and only if X is more likely given H1 than given H2.
So X being the thing we see, the evidence.
Yeah.
So the thing we see is more likely given one hypothesis over another hypothesis.
Yeah.
So if I have one hypothesis that guarantees the gold brick will be there, and one hypothesis that it's only a small chance the gold brick will be there, is that evidence of the hypothesis that guarantees the gold brick will be there?
Well, I mean, what I think, so I think that the evidence would sway in favor of H2 in that case. I mean, look, you're familiar with the Bayes theorem. There's a lot of different variables in there. There's not just the probability of the evidence given the hypothesis. There's also the probability of the hypothesis on the background information.
Priors, it's called priors.
So they're on priors, right? So, I mean, like I said, I really don't see how this has anything to do with morality.
Well, priors.
I don't think that in order for me to say that this implies that I must have a verification of that. I mean,
I never said that. That's not any part of anything I said.
Well, then we agree. We agree that that's not necessary.
Right, but I'm saying there's a contradiction in your definition. So you said your definition of evidence is that if we would expect to see evidence X more on hypothesis 1 than hypothesis 2, then that's evidence of hypothesis 1, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not here to defend a position on evidentiary standards. I'm just telling you why it is that I won't take that off ramp that you put forward.
I literally didn't offer an off ramp here. That's not. I've never said anything about empiricism. So I'm showing that definition you provided is a post hoc ergo propter hoc fallacy. It is simply defining anything into existence that has a high probability of explaining the data and saying it's evidence of that hypothesis. Which, like you said, we could just make up whatever we wanted to explain the data. Which, I mean, what you said is an argument William Lane Craig uses and many apologists use to define evidence in the Bayesian way, which
Mhm.
does exactly have the problem you stated. That I think you're 100% right. You could make up anything you want that is a hypothesis that could be a high probability of explaining the data and call the data evidence of that hypothesis. This is a problem with the way Bayesian epistemology is used. And so I agree with your assessment that is a terrible definition of evidence, and I don't think you or Craig should use it. But if you wanted to move on to bring up evidence of some other kind, that'd be great.
Okay, so like I said, we have our observation. The observation is that we perceive a realm of moral facts. The hypothesis is that those moral facts are objective. And I think that the objectivity of moral facts predicts a morally perfect being to ground them. Now, I understand that you're a moral realist. Is that right?
Yep.
So, as far as the first part of it, I think that we agree. We agree that there is that there are objective moral facts.
Yep.
We agree that that's a part of reality, and then it just comes to explaining it, right? What would we predict? And the reason why I think that it would predict a perfect being, a perfect person, is because moral values like justice, compassion, love, those sorts of things, those are all moral. Those are all character qualities, right? So, for example, if I said that on the wall behind you, on the other side of that wall, there's an object of some kind. I'm not going to tell you what it is, but I will tell you that it's just, it's loving, and it's compassionate. You would you think it's a person, or would you think it's an inanimate object?
Person.
Right, you think it's a person. And so when we look at what's going to ground values like love and justice and compassion, these moral virtues that we experience through our moral experience, it seems reasonable to infer that it would be a person that would ground those because they're personal character traits.
Well, it seems like you've made the assumption that the thing that is going to ground them has to have those properties, which I see no evidence of that at all. Like, I agree morality is objective, but there seems to be no reason to think that the thing that grounds them is just or loving or compassionate.
Yeah, if it's going to ground love, then it's going to have to convey to love somehow that its properties. And so, I mean, like for example, well, I mean, it's a grounding relation. It comes from the things below it. I mean, it can't inherit things that aren't below it. And like I said, I mean, if you look
What?
at it, can't inherit things that aren't that it. There's got to be some sort of connection between the grounding and the thing it's grounded.
Sure, but I mean, I think what you just said was a composition division fallacy. So, like, it seems like you're saying that no new kinds of properties can arise from interactions that don't exist in the prior state. So, like, stars. Do you
No,
think the origin of the universe was a star?
no.
But stars came about from non-stars, right?
Well, stars are a way of referring to particular interactions. But the reason why
Hydrogen
that
atoms,
what's that?
protons, neutrons, you can pick literally any particle you want. Those things didn't exist at the Big Bang. They came about from like quantum fields. Those produced these things. They came about, they were not in the original fundamental nature of reality. They came about as emergent properties of the fundamental nature of reality. So, likewise, love can be an emergent property of whatever the fundamental moral law is. It doesn't need to be in the law. The law doesn't need to be loving. Love can be a emergent property of the law.
Yeah. So the problem there is that emergent properties come from compositions. So, for example, you get water molecules together. A water molecule by itself doesn't demonstrate cohesion or adhesion, but when you combine water molecules together, you get cohesion and adhesion. And so it's a property of of composing that you get these emergent properties. But the problem is that like justice isn't something it's not a composite object.
Yeah, it is.
There's not a composite object that's justice.
Yeah, it is. It's a
Uh,
sensation in the brain.
you can't divide it in two and have justice, half a justice over here and half a justice over there. Justice is a concept, and it's not something that is a physical object.
It is literally a physical object. Concepts are literally physical objects in the brain. So justice is, again, just our brain's way of interpreting different moral facts. It isn't actually in any of the moral facts. It's just our way of interpreting moral facts. So it is divisible. It is emergent in the brain.
Okay, so that's an off ramp you could take. The reason why I wouldn't take that off ramp is because what you're suggesting is incoherent to me. Like I don't even know what it would mean to have half of love or to have half of justice. I do know what it would mean to have half of a brain, but the fact that you can divide a brain in half, you can't divide concepts in half, like ideas in half. You can think of half a thing, but you can't divide the thought in half. Gives us good reason to think that these sorts of qualities are not the physical.
Well,
And so again,
mm,
your position would rely on a very strict physicalism
no.
for. Okay, well then you agree that justice is non-physical.
No, like neither of those things are required here. So I think love is a concept. Justice is a concept, and a concept is made up of a bunch of different ideas. So if you remove any of the different ideas, you are subdividing justice, you are subdividing love. So you can say this set of properties is love, and someone can say, no, I think this set of properties in love, and they can change it or add or take away some. So yes, you can subdivide the concept of love quite easily. It's not hard, regardless of whether or not it's physical. So again, justice is a composite of a bunch of other ideas. It's not a primitive.
Yeah, I mean, you could take that route. Again, I don't, because that's foreign to my personal experience. I suspect that'll be foreign to most people's personal experience, where you experience something like justice. Sure, there can be different applications of justice, different ways that it's applied, but the actual concept of justice itself doesn't strike me as like a water molecule where there's hydrogen and atom bonded together, where like it's a composite thing stuck together. That's certainly not within my first person experience, and so if that's in your first person experience, it's just like God, where I'd say I have a first person experience of God. That doesn't make you obligated to believe it. If you really do have this first person experience of things like love and justice, where they're divisible, again, to me that's incoherent. But if that's your first person experience, I mean, I don't know what's going on in your head, and just like you don't know what's going on in mine, and so I'm not going to take that as persuasive, because again, I mean, I don't even know what that would mean to have half of justice.
Okay, do people have different concepts of what justice is?
People can apply it different ways. They can think there's different ways to apply it. So they can say that this is so. Like for example, in certain countries, they might say that you should take someone who's a homosexual and murder them. In our country, we don't think that we should murder them. And so, there's different applications of justice. We both think that they're doing something just. They just have different applications of it.
Okay,
So
but
that's different than dividing it.
right. So I asked, do people have different concepts of justice, different definitions, different applications, different concepts of justice?
No, I think the concept of justice is like a primitive. People might describe it in different ways, but I think that generally it's the same concept that we're talking about. So when I say justice, you know what I'm talking about.
Well,
You
I
don't
know
have
the
to
dictionary
actually define
definition,
it.
but the dictionary definition is 100% a composite. We like everybody in linguistics agrees that. So I don't know how it could be a primitive. If you say it's a primitive, I have no idea what you're talking about. If you say it's a composite in the dictionary definition, then I know what you mean. That's what I assumed you mean. I don't know what you
Yeah.
mean when you say
Well,
it's a
philosopher Eric
primitive.
Muhlenberg thinks that they are primitives. In fact, he takes them to be brute facts, and so in that case they would be fundamental. They're not divisible, and so yeah, this is not a fringe view that I'm putting forward. And like I said, it's part of my first person experience, and people have to ask themselves, does it make sense to have half of compassion? Does it make sense to have a third of compassion? I mean, can you divide it up that way? And if that makes sense to them, I don't even know what that would mean, but it's incoherent to me, and so I'm not buying it.
So a brute fact means it has no explanation, which means it can't be grounded in a
Correct.
god.
Right. Eric Willenberg's an agnostic, so yeah, he's not going to say they're grounded in God.
Right. So you're saying it's a composite of God's nature.
No.
Okay, so if it's a primitive, that means it's not grounded in God. That's
A composite is two things that are bonded together, like a composite object would be things that are put together
okay.
to make a whole.
So it's grounded in God's nature. It's not a primitive.
Right.
There's something else
Well,
that's
I
more
haven't said that.
primitive.
I haven't said God.
Well,
I've said in a perfect person.
You said justice was a primitive.
In terms of our language, in terms of the concept of us experiencing it, I'm saying that it may be the case that we can't get more simple in the definition than to refer to it. So, for example, Graham Oppy gives the example of catness. Like, we all know what a cat is, but you'd have a really hard time finding a definition that picks out all and only cats. What makes for catness? It's hard to describe exactly what makes for catness, and that's Graham Oppy's example. And so it may be the case that justice is a primitive in
Well,
that way.
cats aren't a primitive. The reason we can't get a definition of cat is because it's on a spectrum, and spectrums are very hard to define very specific terms. So if you're saying justice is kind of like a cat, and there's an infinite amount of spectrum between the different scopes of what justice could be, then yeah, it's going to be hard to give a specific definition of justice like it is cat.
Yeah,
That would kind of just prove my point that it's a spectrum.
that wasn't what Grandma P had said as far as the spectrum goes. Maybe he said that elsewhere, but that's not what I heard him say.
Well, I don't know what you heard him say, but that's just the way why we can't define a cat. It's not a primitive. It's not. There's not some objective definition of cat. It's just how we categorize species, which is on a spectrum, which has to deal with the problem of identity because it's literally a thing in evolution that we can't define species exactly because there isn't such a definition because they're all on small little spectrums. So it's just a fact of the matter. That's the way it is. And Grandma P doesn't disagree with that in any way. So I don't know what your point was there because cat isn't a primitive either.
My point is that the idea of catness is a primitive in the way that you're using. Maybe you're using primitive in a way that I'm not intending it.
Okay, what do you mean by primitive?
There are certain things that we experience that we can kind of describe and label, but it's hard to come up with precise definitions for them. That's what I mean by primitive. Like in language, it's something where it's like a simple concept where it's kind of like I'll know it when I see it. Like there was one politician, I can't remember his name. He was trying to outlaw pornography, and one of the problems that he had was putting in a legal code. How do you describe exactly what pornography is? And he said, "Well, I don't know how to define it, but I'll know it when I see it." So there's certain qualia, there's certain things that we experience where it's hard to get exactly precise definitions. And so when you bring up justice and say, "Well, look, people have all these different kinds of ideas of justice," yeah, we may not be able to have a precise definition of justice, but it doesn't follow from that it's a composite object like a chair or like a water molecule.
Sure.
So I at least am not obligated to believe that it is a composite object just by the fact that different people can describe it in different ways.
So if are there different factors that make something just or unjust?
Are there different factors? What do you mean by factors?
Properties, categories, ways
Let's say
to.
there are states of affairs that are just, and there are states of affairs that are unjust. Or
So
there are
like
other states of affairs that I guess that would be ajust. That would be neither.
so like if I would say a lot of theists say justice is, I don't know, that which corresponds to God's nature or something like that. There's some other thing there that isn't. It's not just the word. There's some other defining factors in what makes something just, like corresponds to God's nature, corresponds to the Platonic object. Just desserts. Like there's something else there in the definition. More
Yeah.
so.
So you're conflating the use of language, which is what I'm talking about, and ontology. So you can have a definition for why it is that something's the case, but then not having to do with the semantic uses of the term. And so your point seemed to be that you were saying that people kind of describe justice differently, and that this means that they're describing different parts of justice, and that therefore justice is a composite object. That was what it seemed like you were driving at.
Sort of. Yeah, I'm saying justice is composed of other ideas. It's not an idea onto itself.
Yeah. So for me to acknowledging that there can be a wide semantic range for how we use the term doesn't imply that there isn't a thing that is justice. So I don't see how that follows to say that people use this term differently. So therefore it's a composite object. I don't see how that follows.
Okay, so I think I understand your position now. You're saying there's this ontology of justice. It's a thing that exists somewhere, which I would just say there's zero evidence for. I'd say that it's a concept in the brain, and the concept in the brain is a composite of other ideas, and that seems to be what all the evidence indicates. So I think that your position seems irrational to me to think that justice is literally an ontological thing that exists out there.
There's no evidence that it's a concept in the brain.
Well, I'm imagining it right now. That's pretty good evidence.
That's not in your brain, though.
What?
There's no evidence that that's in your brain, that you aren't an immaterial. Like you could obviously go the physicalist route and say that you are your brain, your mind is your brain. And then you can go the dualist interactionist route where you think that there's a soul that interacts with the body and interacts with the brain. And there's just no evidence that you are just your brain.
Well, everyone in neurology, psychology, cognitive science, and the philosophy of mind would disagree on that one.
Well, then they're wrong. I mean, I'm not going to just agree because they say that, and I don't agree that all of them say that.
Well, they do. So, like, I have
In
number
principle,
of
there's no way to
studies. I
verify
have a
that.
number of studies on the consensus on here, and it's that if there are novel testable predictions made that we can interact with the brain and mess with consciousness, and we do interact with the brain and mess with consciousness, that's good evidence that it's physical. We would not expect that to be the case if it was just a receiver or whatever. So, the fact that we can directly interact with the brain and change consciousness and manipulate consciousness, turn things on and off, is good evidence it's physical, since that was the hypothesis made by most people in the field.
But that prediction was just as easy is just as predicted by dualist interactionists.
Post hoc, so it wasn't a prediction by them. That's the problem. It's like you can make any theory fit the data after you know the evidence, but only the one that can predict the data before you know it is the good hypothesis, and the only one that did that was physicalism. That's why it's the consensus by a huge margin.
Yeah, that's not true at all. Dualist interactionists would predict that impacts on the brain would have an impact on the empirical experiences that people interact from the brain and what your soul interprets from the world. That
Well,
would
no.
absolutely be predicted by dualist interactionists.
No. So you have to modify dualism to make that the case. So, for example, you can have consciousness outside of your body and someone zaps your body and your consciousness is completely unaffected. And so it would not follow that if dualism was true, messing with the brain would affect your consciousness. So that's not something you would expect on dualism. Obviously, if physicalism is true and consciousness is literally the brain, then obviously if you mess with the brain, you're going to mess with consciousness. That's entailed by the theory. It's not entailed by dualism. So if you're a dualist, you would not necessarily expect that messing with the brain would affect consciousness, which is why it was predicted by the physicalists, and they made all the predictions and they got it all right. And many of the dualists made contradictory predictions and said this was not going to occur, and they got it wrong. That's why the consensus is physicalism today in every science of the mind.
Yeah, no, it's not. I just don't agree. And so, like I said, I do think that dualist interactionism predicts that you would see impacts from the body if you mess with the body, and that if the brain is in the mind is getting information that comes through the body, then you would expect if you interrupt that information, then you're going to have those the information coming to the brain is going to be different. So, for example, we're on a video feed right now, right?
Yeah.
So if some hacker, got into that video feed and changed it, then it could come through on my end, and they could do whatever they want. They could give you whiskers, they could give you like big cat ears, they could do whatever, and that's what I would see, and so that's what I would be reacting to. And so, yeah, you actually would have the same empirical results from dualist interactionism as you would with physicalism and those kinds of studies. And that's why, in principle, you can't disprove the brain or disprove the existence of an immaterial mind through those sorts of experiments. And so, like I said, you don't have to go my route, go down my path, but that's a reasonable position to take, is to say, look, this position, dualist interactionism, just as easily predicts the evidence as dualism. It's not a race to who got there first, and it's not a popularity contest among neuroscientists. That just is what is predicted by the theory, and so I'm at least rational for not believing that. The other issue,
well, definitely not. You're definitely not rational in that case, because we can prove again that's post hoc reasoning. So if I have a theory that predicts everything, and so for example, I say, I don't know, just a theory that predicts literally everything, and here's another theory that predicts 1 out of the 10 possibilities, and we discover the 1 out of the 10 possibilities is correct. That's evidence of the theory that predicted only that one. If there's another theory that predicted the other 10, all 10, and you falsified the 9, and that other theory was like, oh, well, that's okay because we have a version of the theory that can fit this one thing. Well, that's a bad theory. That's a silly theory to hold because it predicted all of the things. And when we falsify them, it just changes itself to fit the remaining data. It's called a God of the gaps fallacy.
It's not changing itself to fit the data.
Well, it did. This is what I'm saying. This is literally the history of the philosophy of mind, is that no, dualists and idealists did not expect that the brain would affect consciousness. They think that you could have conscious things that were not affected by the brain. That was the main predictions of the field, and that was proven false, which is why the people who believed idealism and dualism had to change their theory and fit the scientific data, just like people who believed in God did once we discovered evolution. They had to get rid of the young earth creationist idea and make it fit the scientific data. So the scientific data predicted the one thing, or physicalism predicted the one thing we discover that mess the brain, you get consciousness. idealism and dualism predicted 10 other things, and those were falsified, so they had to abandon those hypotheses and fit the data.
Yeah, that wouldn't be a weakness on the view if it does predict all 10 options. I disagree. I mean, if you're saying that, look, I've got this hypothesis over here, and it's narrow, this hypothesis that fits pretty much any result, then it's not disconfirmed by finding one of the results that it predicts. And so I again, I'm not. And then there's other reasons, like for example, my first person experience of having free will. I make decisions, like I decided to come on and speak to you today. I have the first person experience of choosing to do that. And that is not at home on a physicalist interpretation of the mind.
I
And so
agree
there's a
there. I
lot
don't
of
think what
what's that?
I agree. I don't think free will is possible. I totally agree there.
Yeah, and so since I have the first person experience of free will, and it's impossible on physicalism, then it's strongly disconfirmed by my first person experience. I make decisions all day long. I think everybody does. But I mean, if you don't, then there may be something wrong somewhere. I don't know, but I certainly have that experience. And so, you know, I'm not buying what you're selling, I guess is what I'm saying.
Sure. So how do you make a decision without being determined by prior reasons? How do you experience that?
Free will. I choose it.
Well, that's
So I
begging
chose
the
to come
question.
on.
So that's not evidence. What is the methodology? How do you actually do that? Because to me, that seems like you made a decision based on prior reasons, which is exactly what we would expect. I don't see how you experienced free will there.
I did experience free will. I'm experiencing it directly. So I think the problem is you're saying, okay, well, now I need an explanation of your free will in order to accept that you have free will.
Well, I need a coherent definition. So, for example, for me, it seems like any decision you make is either going to be done for reasons, and so it's going to be determined, or it's going to be done for no reason, and it's going to be random. And I don't see any logically possible way to get out of that. It seems like either any decision you make, pick A over B or whatever, either you picked A because there were prior reasons that caused you to pick A, or there were no prior reasons at all, and it was just random.
Yeah, that doesn't follow at all. Having reasons to make a choice, you know, a choice being non-arbitrary does not imply that it's determined. There's just no
Um,
implication from I chose this and I had reasons to choose it to it was determined. There's not a connection there.
well, I'm defining reason as literally anything that is like an electrical signal causing it to choose A over B. It's literally a determining factor that causes the decision to be made. So either there is a determining factor causing the decision to be made, or there is no determining factor and it's random.
Well, I'm the determining factor. I determine my decisions.
Okay, sure, but how? That's the question. Like, if you can do it based off of literally nothing, if there's literally no input data, by definition, it's random. So there has to be some
No.
input data, whether it's from your.
So the explanation of how my decision comes about is that I make a free will choice.
Okay, but
That's the explanation.
that's not
Now
an
you're asking
explanation.
for what's the explanation of the free will choice.
Well, I want a definition of free will. I'm looking to like, what is the free will thingy other than just an incoherent concept? To me, it seems like you're saying I round square, and you're saying I round square is just the explanation. I'm like, it doesn't make any sense. What is a round square? And so
My choice of x is free if my choice of x is not determined by outside causes.
okay, the round square is a round square if it's not a triangle. Well, no. So you would
You
need to
don't
again.
understand the words that I've said?
No, I don't
Or how they come
understand.
together to make a sentence?
No, I don't understand what you mean by free because it seems like round square. So any
I
decision.
said a choice of x is free if the choice of x is not determined by outside causes.
Right. So that would be randomness. That'd be pure randomness. It would be free.
It's not randomness.
No. So again, just your definition is a choice of X is free if it's not determined by prior causes or something like that, right?
Outside causes.
Outside causes. So if something is not determined by outside causes like quantum mechanics, then it's free by your definition.
It's determined by the agent. So an agent's choice of x is free. I thought the agent was implied, but I'll put it in. An agent's choice of x is free if the agent's choice of x is not determined by outside causes. That is outside of the agent.
So if the agent's choice is caused by randomness, then it's free.
I don't know what you mean by caused by randomness. I don't know what that means.
Quantum mechanics fluctuating with your brains or whatever, your choice.
I don't. Well, again, I'm not a physicalist, so I don't think that you are your brain.
Okay,
So I don't think that
that
I
doesn't.
don't think the chemical reactions in the brain causing you to do it would be an inside cause.
Right. So that's just an analogy here. So if randomness, if pure randomness, like quantum mechanics, even if it's in the soul realm, the non-physical soul realm, there's non-physical soul quantum mechanics. If that caused you to make a decision randomly, then by your definition, it would be free.
Well, I don't believe that quantum mechanics is random, and so again, I don't. It can be underdetermined without being random.
Well, that's not the consensus in physics. Literally, randomness is a force in physics, is the consensus in physics. So, I mean,
Well,
you can disagree.
there's something like 10 explanations of quantum mechanics, but again,
Well,
we're
that
like
doesn't
really
change.
far
What
afield
I
from the
said was
point.
literally factually the case. It is the consensus. Randomness is a force. There is no hidden variable. The hidden variable hypothesis is completely rejected. It is literally randomness. So, but whether or not you accept it doesn't matter. No one cares if you accept it. The point is that it's logically possible. Randomness is a thing, and if randomness is a thing, then by your definition, randomness is free.
So again, randomness doesn't have causal powers. Randomness is a way of describing events, whether they um,
Happen without
are
determining
random or not, I
factors.
guess.
That's what randomness means. It happens without determining factors, which was the same definition you gave of free.
Yeah. So in that case, there's not an agent who's choosing X in that case. So
Okay,
yeah,
so
I guess I disagree with the way you're setting up the scenario because I don't think that you're smuggling in that your choices are caused by quantum mechanics, and so at that point, no, it would be determined by quantum mechanics.
okay, sure. So you're saying randomness isn't free, determinism isn't free. So you got what's the third option here?
Free will,
Yeah, but no, that's not an
agent
explanation.
causation, agent causation
That's just a synonym. So I need to explain how does that work? Like to
so
me,
again, I've said agent causation explains the choice. That explains how it is that you have free will. You're using agent
well, that's
causation.
just a synonym. That's like saying a round square explains a round square. You need to explain how does it do that?
You're again, and I'm let me try to finish this time. I don't mean to be rude. That was rude. I'm just saying, like, I'm like halfway through the sentence. Um, I'm saying that you're asking how it is. How is it that you have a free choice? I'm saying agent causation explains how it is that I have a free choice because I'm making the choice freely through agent causation. You're now asking, okay, well, how do you explain agent causation?
I'm looking for a definition of agent causation that makes sense. So just saying agent causation and saying free will is like me saying a synonym and another synonym. Like it doesn't explain anything. Just giving a different word that means the same thing doesn't in any way explain what's going on there. I need a coherent definition of what both of these words mean, agent causation and free will, because neither of those things have any explanatory power. They have no explanatory scope. They have no coherent definition. They're completely meaningless terms as far as I can tell. So I need to add meaning to these terms.
What was the agent's choice of X is not determined. You asked me to explain what I mean by free will. The agent's choice of X is free if it's not determined by causes outside of the agent.
Okay, but that literally doesn't work. So if I said a potato is not a triangle, well, that means that literally everything in the universe is a potato. It tells me nothing about what a potato is because it's not a triangle. So telling me what it is not doesn't give me any content to explain what it is. Or I need to know what it is.
I can't make the definition more simple than that. So if that sounds like potatoes and triangles to you, I can't explain it more simply.
Well, so for any definition of anything ever, if I just say X is not Y, what does that tell me about X?
That it's not Y.
Okay, so what is X? I said X is not a potato. What is X?
So, well, I mean, again, I don't think that that's a good analogy because there are a whole host of objects, but here there's only a few. There's either outside causes or there's the agent. And so if I said, X is, the analogy would be X is not anything but a potato.
That's just saying X is a potato.
Right.
But that doesn't help you here because you're not saying that. You're saying
cause is free.
Well, no, you're not telling us anything about agent cause. You're saying agent cause is not determined. So if you said agent cause is not determined, well, okay, now it's not, that's a coherent sentence. But saying agent cause is not determined is like saying X is not a potato. Well, that doesn't tell us anything about what it is. And the reason this is a problem is because you can say X is not an existing property, or X doesn't exist in reality. You can use the not property to eliminate all logically possible worlds and have a coherent sentence of X is not. So saying X is not doesn't actually show this is an existing thing or that it's real or that it's coherent. You're just eliminating something that is coherent and providing no alternative.
Well, once again, I mean, we have a first person experience of making free will choices. And I've explained what I think that is as far as X and the causation. I can't explain it more simply than that.
So you feel like you have this magical new ontological cause thing, which has never been demonstrated. Therefore,
Nope, I don't believe in magic. Magic refers to mana, which is some
nope.
force that
That's
is
one
positive
definition. That's one
permeate the
definition
universe.
of magic. That's not all the definitions of magic. So the way I'm using magic here is some supernatural new causation, which has never been demonstrated and has no evidence. That would be
What do you mean
magic.
by supernatural?
Above the laws of physics.
Then yes,
Right. So you're saying
yeah,
there's this
it would be
new magical.
non-determined. The laws of physics are deterministic.
Well, they're literally indeterministic. It's literally, again, the consistent physics. But if you're saying there's this new ontological force which you have access to through direct experience, well, I'd just say, well, that's just a delusion. Like, it's more likely
Okay.
that you have a delusion and you've misconstrued some subjective experience than you actually have access to a direct ontology of the universe. Like, literally, we know for a fact our experiences are not reliable sources of information about the fundamental nature of reality. The only thing that we can reliably say is that I exist, and anything beyond that, you don't have access to the fundamental nature of
Yeah,
reality. So if you
and
think
I
that
would say
you,
ditto. I would say the same exact thing about you.
I
That
agree.
you've somehow misunderstood by not experiencing your free will. That there's something wrong. And I mean, I could say the same thing back at you. I mean, if I experience something firsthand that you don't experience, and you say you're not experiencing it, okay. But that doesn't mean I'm wrong just because you're not buying it. Like I said, you're not obligated to believe anything. If you don't have a first person experience of free will choices, okay. I doubt most people agree. I think, again, I do have a first person experience of making choices. And I imagine people in the audience who chose to tune in tonight do as well.
Okay, so what I was saying is that we both know, as you mentioned before, we need some way to differentiate imagination from reality. You have an imaginary experience which you think corresponds to something in
You call it
reality.
imaginary. I don't agree with that
Well,
definition.
imaginary just means it's a concept in your brain. That's all it means. So it's literally an idea you have, an experience, ideas, thoughts. Those are all imaginary. They're a thing in your brain or imagination, will,
Are moral
whatever.
facts imaginary?
Everything you imagine is imaginary. So if I imagine the world is round, that is an imaginary idea in my head. Literally everything starts as a thing in your head. It can't
Yeah, I think
not.
it's a pejorative word in this case,
What?
and so that's why I would object to it.
I don't understand so like literally everything. Science is imaginary. It's an imaginary concept. Every fact is an imaginary concept, a proposition you've imagined in your head. Everything starts as imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. So you have an imaginary experience, and as you
I don't.
agreed, you need some way to differentiate imagination from reality. And the only way you have to differentiate is said you experienced it, and that is
Well, on your
not.
definition of imagination, imagination is reality because these things are real, and by your definition, they're also imaginary. And so, by your own definition, you've now crossed imagination and reality because
Nope.
you're taking things that are real, like the concepts in my mind, which you agree are real, and saying that they're imaginary. And so now we have imagination and reality overlapping. And
Nope.
so,
So I just don't think you understand the conversation here. So if you're saying free will, agent causation is a literal, objective, existing thing independent of imagination, you're not just saying it exists in your imagination. If you were saying that, I'd be fine. Yes, it exists in your imagination. I agree. Your imagination exists in reality. But does what your proposition states, that there is this agent causation that actually objectively exists independent of our imagination, does that exist in reality? Well, you've provided nothing other than your imagination.
yeah, I mean, like I said, I object to the term imagination used in that way. I think that it's pejorative because imagination is typically used to be like fiction. And the way you're using it, imagination can apply to things that actually exist that are real. Like, for example, I have a conception of our conversation, of the information that's being conveyed between us and that has been conveyed between us. That's real. But by your definition, it's both real and imaginary.
Yeah.
And so we're not dividing between imagination and reality because, on your definition, they're the same thing in that case.
No, again, that's false. You just don't understand the distinction here. It's pretty obvious to everyone. you have the idea that this conversation exists and is real outside of your imagination. Do you have evidence of that? Yes. Like we have empirical evidence that we have conversations and TVs and internet and things. So yes, your idea that we are having a conversation, and that idea which says this is a real thing that exists in the world independent of imagination, is true. So it is an imagination. You have an imaginary idea of the conversation and that it exists in the world, and it also exists in the world. Those are two separate things. The idea in your head
So,
and the fact of the matter are two separate things.
okay, so you're saying that the conversation exists in the world
Yep. And you,
and it's also my imagination.
no, the conversation exists in the world, and you have an idea in your imagination about the conversation that exists in the world.
I think you're saying that we don't have direct interactions with the world. Is that what you're saying? We don't have, through our perceptions, we don't interact with the world. Is that your
No,
position? Okay, well then I had an interaction with the conversation,
right?
and so I don't know how you would account for the information that passed between us in a physicalist sense. But I guess I mean,
What?
yeah, if you think that the brain is the mind, I guess you would have to say
Also,
that.
not have anything to do with what I said. So, I mean, expressing how information transfers between minds is extremely simple. Information theory, Claude Shannon, 1958 paper, like visual and auditory information is presented to you and calculated by the brain. Oh, problem solved. Very, very simple. But that has nothing to do with anything I said. So what I said was you need to differentiate imagination from reality. All ideas in our head start off as imaginary. They're ideas in our head. That's literally our imagination. It is an idea in our head. That's literally what imagination means. Ideas in our head. And then you want to say that it's more than that. It's more than just an idea in your head that we have this agent causation. It is a thing. It is a real kind of causation, like mass or energy or spin. Those are real things that exist independent of our imagination. They also started as imaginary. The idea of spin was a thing that a physicist thought up, and then he made a prediction to try and confirm it was true independent of his imagination. But all things start as imaginary. So you've done the first part. You've come up with an imaginary hypothesis, just like everyone in physics does. You haven't done the second part, which was give a coherent definition of what that actually means and then show it actually exists in the world. You just said, well, I experienced it. If a physicist said, well, I just experienced spin, people would laugh at him because that's silly. Like, no, you don't get to just experience things, because we know that methodology is a very bad methodology and no one should trust it. And we know that that doesn't work. We know that people's personal experience is a terrible method to try and assess any truth about anything in reality, independent of our imagination. And so you trusting that or choosing to trust that seems like an irrational thing to do, given that we have defeaters for that methodology, that our personal experience is a terrible way to assess evidence of any kind.
Yeah. So the problem, like I said, I mean, that's an off ramp you could take. The reason why I wouldn't take the off ramp is because it lands way too far into skepticism for me. Because, for example, you made reference to the 1958 paper that you read. How do you know you read it? It's your memory, but your
Yep.
memory is only in your head.
Yep.
So by definition, it's imagination.
Yep.
So you can't make that reality and it be imagination at the same time. And so all of our memory beliefs would then be in the realm of imagination. And how do you prove your memory beliefs? Well, through empirical data. But then how do you know you experienced empirical data? Well, that's an imagination. How do you know that the empirical data that you're experiencing, by the rules of inference, lead to the conclusions you're drawing? Well, that would also be imagination. And so how do you prove that? And so
Novel testable predictions. So that's easy. That answering that is super
it doesn't
easy.
have any predictions because you don't have any empirical data that isn't
so
mitigating through this.
that literally doesn't matter. So this is very, very easy to predict. I say I see things like I see a TV and I imagine things. I imagine things like a unicorn, and we need some way to differentiate between the two. And we know a reliable way to do that is science, novel testable predictions. It differentiates imagination from reality. We do know that. If you want to deny that,
idea in your head, and that's
that's perfectly fine. So
You don't know
concepts,
that it's ever predicted anything.
we do know that. So if you want to reject science, that's on you. It just makes you look irrational. But
That's not what it said.
that's literally what you said.
I
So if
said
you're
that
saying
you are
science
saying
doesn't
that.
differentiate imagination from reality, you are just being irrational. So if you
That's
want
not
to
what
make,
it said.
that seemed like what you said, but
No, that's not what it said.
you said that
It
science
said that
can't
your memory
differentiate,
beliefs,
right?
you cannot empirically verify your memory beliefs, because your memory beliefs rely, like the empirical verification would rely on more memory beliefs.
That's not a
You'd have to
problem.
remember that you empirically
It
verified
doesn't,
it.
that literally doesn't matter to the argument. So science literally
It
is an
does to
imagine.
mine.
Well, your argument is irrational, so it doesn't matter.
Okay.
My argument is that you can have imaginary concepts, like science is literally an imaginary concept, and it can differentiate things in our imagination in the world. Does it matter it's imaginary? No, that's not an objection at all. It doesn't address the problem. So yes, you can use imaginary things to differentiate other imaginary things. Personal experience is not one of those. We know for a fact that fails. So that is not a successful methodology to differentiate imagination from reality. So if you think your personal experience gives you access to some new kind of causation on par with physics, some fundamental nature of reality, that's irrational, literally irrational.
Yeah, I disagree. I mean, I think it's irrational to reject that personal experience uh, differentiates between imagination and reality, because the only way we interact with the world is through personal experience. Even if you're reading a book, you're personally taking in you're having a personal experience of reading the book and thinking through the concepts, and your rational reflection on what's being said in the book is personal experience, where you have this personal experience that the data that they're presenting does or doesn't infer the conclusions that they're drawing. And so no, I disagree. I think that you would land in utter skepticism, because you wouldn't be able to trust rational intuition. You wouldn't be able to trust memory, because again, those are personal experiences. And so, yeah, I think you're fully justified in taking your personal experiences to be true, unless you have some reason to think otherwise.
So it's a tu quoque fallacy, and also it doesn't apply. So like if I said all
Well, labeling
roses.
it is fine, but you don't have access to the world without
Okay, but
accessing
that
it through your
doesn't address
first
the point. So I
experiences.
don't think you're just missing the point here. So saying that all things are imaginary is like saying that all roses are flowers, all flowers are roses. Like, yes, that's the case, but some flowers have a specific extra property here. So science isn't just imagination, it's imagination plus novel testable predictions. So there's a way to filter out the bad imagination. You have no such way, and that's the problem. The way you're using to try and filter out bad imagination has literally been proven to be a bad imagination. Science has literally been proven to be a good imagination, so you simply saying they're both imagination is a false equivalence fallacy. We know science works. Your method, we know, does not work. We've proven your method does not work. We've proven science does work. So it's not equivalent to say, well, they're both imagination, therefore they're equivalent. Tu quoque, literally not a false equivalent, or literally a false equivalency. So no, the fact that science is imaginary does not put it on par with your bad imagination.
I don't think you've understood what I've said.
I'm pretty sure I did.
It seems
So
obvious to me that you haven't.
you said you can't trust you can't trust your memory or your imagination if we can't trust our personal experience. Like, no, that's false. There's lots of different kinds of personal experiences we have, and some methodologies have that plus something else. A method makes future testable predictions. So we have the imagination of our personal experience plus the imagination of our scientific method, and those two things are good and reliable. Our personal experience plus direct experience of agent causation is not reliable. So your method is terrible and has been proven wrong. My method has been proven successful. Simply calling them both personal experience doesn't in any way invalidate that these two kinds of things work together successfully. Experience plus novel testable prediction. Whereas yours doesn't, even though they're the same, they start at the same starting point of imagination.
Yeah, again, how do you know that anything's been proven? You're relying on your memory. That is your first person experience of remembering
Which isn't a
the
problem.
experiment. What's
So
that?
that's not a problem.
But that is a problem. And that's
No,
the problem that I'm bringing up. That if you can't trust your first person experiences, then you can't trust your memory beliefs, because those are first
oh
person
my
experiences.
composition division
I mean,
fallacy. So like the fact that we can't trust all
not
of
a
our first,
fallacy.
it literally is. It's so many. You've presented so many. It's just painful. The fact that we
Well,
can't trust
Alexander Proust
some.
makes an argument for it. It's called the principle of credulity. And it holds that you are justified in believing your first person experiences unless and until you have a reason to think otherwise.
Yes, and we have that. A defeater has been presented that our first
That's not how
person.
it works. You can't have a global defeater.
What?
You can have a defeater of a particular experience. Like, for example, you remember
Like personal
floating
experience.
through the
Yes, like
clouds
personal
with
experience has a
unicorns.
defeater, which is that we
And
know
then
they're
your
wrong.
experience of waking up is the defeater of that experience of floating through the clouds with unicorns. But that doesn't defeat all of your experiences, right? So you saw the unicorn in your dream, and then you wake up, and then that defeats your experience, your belief that you saw the unicorn. But that doesn't mean that you don't see me now through the screen, right? And so you don't
Right?
have global defeaters in that way.
We do. It's not a global. A global defeater would be literally a defeater for literally everything. That's not. You don't need a defeater for literally everything. But I can defeat direct personal experience having any real reference to ontology. That has a defeater, because we know that direct personal experience has a vast number of things that it justifies which have been proven false. So if that methodology of a direct experience was a reliable methodology, then we can say the majority of the things we gain of beliefs through direct experience would be true, when in fact the opposite is the case. The majority of things we get about direct experience are false. And so any given particular thing that you think is true given from direct experience would be on the false likelihood category. And so unless you have some other method.
It hasn't been proven, because like I said, you can't prove that you can't trust your first person experiences.
Yes, you can. You can literally do that. That's what illusions, delusions, fallacies, misconception, biases, we've proven for a fact that there are millions of these things. Humans make up stupid, silly ideas from their direct experience all the times. UFOs, aliens, all kinds of crap.
Be more clear. It's contradictory to say that you can prove that you can't trust your first person experience.
No, it's not.
We have proven.
Literally, no, it's not. So saying you can't.
It is. Like, I guess
so I don't understand what you're not understanding here. If I say you can't trust your first person experience on its own, but you can trust it in addition with something else, no, that's not logically contradictory. You can't trust your personal experience on its own because it's garbage. We've proven it's garbage. We can trust our first person experience in addition with this other thing called novel testable predictions, because that's reliable.
But you don't have any novel testable predictions. You're looking at me through the screen. You are not now experiencing a novel testable prediction.
All of the things,
novel testable predictions that you have ever experienced exist in your memory.
That's not a problem. It's literally not a problem. I don't know why you keep saying that as if it's an objection. It's literally not. Literally not an objection. You can trust your memory in addition with something else. Novel testable predictions. You cannot trust your memory if it's just your memory, because we know false memories are a thing. So you need some additional way, in addition to the memory, to filter out the bad memories. We have a method to do that. It's called science. This works. We know this works. If you reject this works, you are rational. So yes, we do have an additional thing in addition to the memory that we can use in tandem. When we use them together, this is very good. It's very successful, reliable epistemology. If we don't use them together, if you get rid of one of them and you just trust the memory, you're being irrational. We know people who do that as being irrational. We have literally thousands of examples of this.
So the reason I'm not going to buy that is because literally a second ago, everything from a second ago, you have to is completely in your memory.
Yes.
So there's no novel testable prediction that's not in your memory, unless you're in the act of testing it. It's going to be in your memory, and so you have to rely all and only on your memory for the things that you know. And so there's not memory plus. There's just memory and your immediate experience, what you're experiencing in this moment.
Yeah, and I've already debunked that. So we can have that in addition to science. So we have memories of our other memories. Science is a memory. Science is literally one of the memories. So we do have science. It's one of the memories. What?
You don't have science right now. It's your memory.
I don't understand what you're saying. So all of the things that I'm experiencing, I'm justified to believe if it already has an implicit empirical basis. Yes, like if I see a horse or whatever, that's rational. If I see a unicorn, that's not rational. I should not believe that. I would be an idiot if I believed it. So I saw a unicorn, because that would be something that we have good defeaters for. That's what you're saying. You have this direct experience of this fundamental nature of reality of agent causation. That would be like you seeing a unicorn and saying, I believe it just because I see it. That's silly. That is literally irrational.
Lots of unicorns, Tom. They're called rhinoceros.
Yes, clearly that's what I meant by the word, and you're not being disingenuous there. Obviously.
I'm kidding with you. Come on. You got pink hair. You can't lighten up.
So obviously the point, the point here is that obviously you cannot trust your direct experience unless you have something else in addition to that.
You can say that, but you haven't demonstrated it. So
every fallacy, every bias, every illusion, every delusion, every misconception, every false theory. Yes, I've proven that.
No, I don't agree. Again, I don't agree. I think that you can't but rely on your experience. And so I guess I guess we have just a fundamental disagreement here. I mean, I don't think that number one, your experiences don't have to be an infallible guide to be a reliable guide. So that doesn't follow.
Well, they'd have to be more likely correct than incorrect.
As I said before, you don't have access to any of these studies without it being mitigated through your memory.
Which is, as I mentioned, that doesn't not a problem for anything I said.
It does for everything you've been saying.
Literally not.
You don't have any novel testable predictions without your memory. You don't have any experience of science being correct without your memory.
Which is fine.
And so if you can't trust your memory on its own, then you don't have any of that data either. And so
People remember being abducted by aliens. Is that reasonable?
I've not talked to any of those people or looked
I don't
into
care if you talk to them. Is it reasonable?
if they experienced being abducted by aliens, then I mean, yeah, if somebody experienced that, then they would be rational in believing that they experienced it, unless and until a defeater was presented. If you presented a defeater, such as there's like the
Illusions,
first
delusions,
paradox, or
misconceptions, fallacies, biases, the fact that we know the human brain is garbage at these kinds of things, like
so
that kind of defeater.
saying that you can have a defeater doesn't mean that, again, you can't have global defeaters to where, because memory is sometimes fallible, you should never trust memory. Like it doesn't follow. It just doesn't follow from what you're saying.
Memory
So you
is
say you
very
proved it,
fallible in
but
very many.
actually proving it is much more difficult.
So again, memory is proven to be fallible in very specific cases, like saying things that don't have an empirical basis. Therefore, anytime you say memory exists something that doesn't have an empirical basis, most likely is false, and that has been confirmed to be true.
Yeah, it just doesn't follow.
Literally does. Literally does.
Literally it doesn't.
Literally does. So that's why in court cases.
Time, right?
Well, no. Again, this is proven in every single academic field. In court cases, if it doesn't have precedent, so the technical term.
What you just said doesn't follow from.
Yes, it literally does. You just don't understand it. Like, okay. If in court, if you say I experienced someone cast a spell and kill somebody else, you don't consider it in court. You throw it out because it doesn't have any precedent. There's no basis for that existing in reality. So if someone said they had
have a defeater.
Right. We have a defeater.
Experience.
You pretend you imagined or memory or experienced something that has no empirical basis. It's been defeated. You've got defeated.
So my personal experiences of free will choices, which have not been defeated, because
which are exactly the same as magic. You've presented magic and it's been defeated. It has no precedent. Like, you have no evidence. Yes, it does, for the exact same reason.
In order for it to be a defeater, it has to give me a reason to think that it's false.
Yeah.
And if in presenting studies that are consistent with my view of dualist interaction, of the way that the soul interacts with the body, doesn't defeat it. It's not an undermining defeater if it's consistent with the belief, right? So, for example, if I said, "Dude, you have pink hair, but my defeater is that you bought pink dye," right? Like, well, that's consistent with it. That's not a defeater.
Right. So if someone says they were abducted by aliens, or saw someone cast a Harry Potter Avada Kedavra spell to kill somebody, the fact that we can't prove that would not be inconsistent with their belief, because magical beings can cast Obliviate and change your memory. So the fact that no one else remembered is not inconsistent with their belief. Therefore, it's not a defeater that we literally know there are thousands of fallacies, biases, misconceptions in the brain that literally cause these things. Oh, it's not a defeater for their position. So they're not irrational to believe someone cast an Avada Kedavra spell. Clearly, your epistemology is just broken.
Yeah, I just don't agree. I mean, you would go to the specific belief, and you present either an undercutting or overriding defeater for that belief. But that undercutting or overriding defeater wouldn't work for everything. So, for example, the alien one, if somebody believed that they had been abducted by aliens, you might get into like the distances involved, that it's unlikely that an alien would be able to travel the distances necessary from an habitable planet, or in the amount of time that the Earth's been here. Those kinds of I mean, I don't know much about alien travel, so I'm kind of winging it here, but I don't know how to disprove aliens because I haven't studied it. But I know that there are problems with saying that aliens have traveled to the Earth. You would go with that kind of stuff. I mean, you wouldn't just say, "Oh, you're an idiot." You wouldn't just say that. And at least that wouldn't be a rational way to try to disprove their beliefs.
Right, I agree. Saying someone is an idiot is just an ad hom. But if we can show that human brains have fallacies, biases, illusions, delusions that literally cause these experiences, that is a defeater. And I don't need to say anything about the experience. It matters. So I can say nothing about the experience. I don't need to in any way address the experience. All I need to say is, does that experience, is it better explained by the fact that it's an illusion, or is it better explained by the fact that it corresponds to the fundamental nature of reality? I can say better explained by illusion, because we can show that's the case.
Yeah, so I mean, that's a route you can go. For me, I don't want that. I think that leaves you in the land of imagination. I don't want to live in the land of imagination. I don't think that's a nice place to be. And so that's why I wouldn't go that route.
Well, okay, but the whole point of mine is because it gets you out of that land, but okay.
Yeah, because it leaves you unable to trust your memory beliefs. So a defeater for any memory would be a defeater for memory generally. And so you'd have to...
No.
That's what you said.
No. So I said...
used free will experience. That was kind of how we got into this topic.
Yeah.
And you said that we have defeaters for free will experience.
Yep.
And we don't, because they're consistent with free will.
That's not how defeaters work.
It has to be an underwriting.
No,
Well,
it
it is
doesn't.
how it works. It has to be. It has to either give you a reason not to trust that you believe that. It has to either undermine your confidence in the belief, or it has to override it. It can't be an overrider, and I don't see how it would possibly even be an underminer. And so there's not a third option.
Well, it doesn't need to contradict. So, for example, if I said I
That's an
saw
overriding defeater to contradict.
right,
The other option is undermining.
right,
And it doesn't undermine it for me. I don't see how it would undermine my confidence that if you poke my brain, I see lights or whatever. I mean, I don't see how that would undermine my belief in my free will choices.
right. So the undermining defeater is that we know that there are thousands of fallacies, biases, illusions, delusions, misconceptions in the brain. So simply our direct experience is very bad at and not in any way trustworthy to use as a method to tell us about the fundamental nature of reality. So any such belief is now defeated. Any such belief
And
that you
that's
have
a non
access.
sequitur. And so I'm not undermined because that's a non sequitur.
How?
It doesn't follow from this is sometimes wrong to therefore therefore it's always wrong, or therefore it's never to be trusted.
If it's mostly wrong,
I don't agree that because we sometimes have these fallacies. I mean, I'm not walking around having hallucinations and things all the time.
well, yes,
Maybe
yes, you
that's
are.
your experience. It's certainly not mine.
Well,
But I don't have an experience of always being wrong. And so if I did have an experience of always being wrong, then yeah, I guess I would think I'm always wrong. But you haven't presented that.
well, that's the thing is that yes, you literally are walking around with illusions and delusions all the time. That's literally what your brain does. We know for a fact that our brain creates tons of illusions and delusions all the time. It's a fact. Most of what you see is that your experience that objects are solid is an illusion based on how our brains perceive things and make up constructs of the world. Our vision is actually flipped in our brains, and it doesn't actually work that way. That's also an illusion produced by our brains. Our brains literally produce mostly things that are illusions. So I don't like, yeah, that is actually the case. Like most human beliefs about the fundamental nature of reality, gods, magic, miracles, supernatural, all of those have been proven wrong.
Okay, so you've just given a couple of examples that are supposed to be defeaters of your first person experience of sight. Everybody's just gonna have to decide if they think they can trust their vision. If they think they can trust their vision, then it's obvious that they don't think that the evidence you're presenting undermines our first person experiences. In other words, if I can trust my vision, despite the fact that my brain is recreating a visual representation of the reality around me, then if I can trust my vision despite that, then it doesn't follow from that I shouldn't trust my vision. And in the same way, it doesn't follow from that I shouldn't trust my first person experiences of free will.
Right. There are some cases where we can prove vision does not work, and in those cases, it is not trustworthy. And there are some cases where we can prove vision does work, and in those cases, it is trustworthy. And to do that, we have this other method called science, and it can differentiate between the two. So in one case, we know it is trustworthy when you see something that has been verified by science. I see a dog. That's perfectly reasonable. If you see something that's not been confirmed by science, a unicorn, probably not reasonable. No, not reasonable. So if you're saying exact same way, you have some personal experience of something that's never been confirmed by science, probably not reasonable.
But if that defeater works in that way, then it also works for memory, because
memory's been confirmed by science many times.
Memory's fungible. It's been confirmed by science that it's fungible. You can cause people to have memories of things that they never experienced. People forget things. Obviously, I think we've all had, at least I've had, the experience of misremembering something. And so, if the fact that your memory is fallible implies that your memory is not to be trusted, then you can't trust your memory of the scientific experience either. That's the point that I was making, is that ultimately, virtually everything you know relies on your memory.
Like you said, the fact that it's wrong sometimes doesn't prove it's wrong all the time. But if there is a specific kind where it's wrong most of the time, it can never be trusted in that case, which is not a defeater for science, because it is not wrong most of the time in the case of memory referring to science, where it is wrong most of the time in the case of referring to personal experience of the fundamental nature of reality. It's mostly wrong then. It's not mostly wrong when it applies to science. So it's trustworthy when it applies to science, not trustworthy when it applies to free will.
Well, it hasn't been shown mostly wrong about experiencing my free will choices. I have to see the study on that because again, the way that those studies are constructed is consistent with free will choices. And so it hasn't proved that your experience of free will choices is mostly wrong.
Well, we can zap your brain
You
and
could
make
say it
you
literally has, but
what?
again, I just don't buy it.
We can zap your brain and make you make a choice when you have no option.
And that does not at all undermine free will. Your ability to determine a choice doesn't imply that without that determination that your choice would be free. In other words, if I force you to pick up a cup, right? Let's assume for the sake of the argument that you have free will, and let's assume for the sake of the argument that I have some way of forcing you to pick up a cup. My ability to force you to pick up a cup, it doesn't follow from that you don't have free will when I'm not forcing you to pick up the cup. So one thought experiment is imagine that a guy has wires into his brain, and those wires, he's got a choice between A and not A, and whenever he goes to choose not A, the wires activate and force him to choose A. You follow me?
Yep.
Is he then determined to choose A when he actually chooses A? Well, no. And so the fact that you can sometimes be determined, it doesn't follow from that you're always determined.
Sure. So my example would be is that we zap you in the brain and you pick A, and you felt like you used free will to pick A. So you had the exact same feeling that you have free will in that case as you do in every other case. But in that case, we know it was determined.
Yeah, so your ability to determine a choice doesn't undermine the fact that you are making those choices when you're not determined. It doesn't follow from that.
Right. I mean, the argument here is that your feeling that you have free will is defeated because we can force you to make a choice and you still have the feeling of free will, even though that you made the choice. Even though we can prove you didn't, I made the choice and put it in your brain, but you still felt like you made the choice. Therefore, your feeling you have free will is proven to be an unreliable source of data.
Yeah, again, that's a non sequitur because just in that same example, we can, presumably, and I've not seen that they've done this, but let's say like Inception style or whatever, maybe not Inception, like the Matrix style, that they can insert memories into your brain. Presumably on your ontology, that would be possible to push a memory into a brain.
Yep.
And so the fact that is possible then would be an undermining defeater for your memory generally. And so therefore you should never trust your memory because then you would have the experience of remembering it, even though it's a false memory that's been pushed into your brain.
What does that have to do with my example? So my example is that your evidence is that you have a feeling of free will, and when I zap your brain, what?
It's a parody of your example.
I don't understand how that has anything to do with my example. So in your example, you said you have a feeling of free will, and I said, okay, you have a feeling of free will when I make the decision for you. So I determined you were going to choose A and zapped your brain and made you choose A, but you had the exact same feeling of free will in that decision as you do in all other decisions. Therefore, and all the decisions could be determined by like your brain, which is something we have a significant amount of evidence for, and your feelings have no supporting evidence other than the fact that you felt them and you feel them in all the cases, whether or not they are determined. Therefore, your feelings are not a way to differentiate whether or not they're determined.
So you feel like you remember X. You have this first person experience of remembering X.
Sure.
And that's the same first person experience of remembering X, even if I pushed X and you didn't actually remember X. You just have this first person experience of it that I've pushed into your brain. That wouldn't undermine all memory. And in the same way, you pushing X into the free will doesn't undermine all free will.
Or it would actually, if you could literally insert memories, that would undermine all memory because you could just think that they're all just inserted by a demon that would undermine all memory.
Yeah, well then again, like I'm not taking that route because that gets you into utter skepticism.
Well, if you literally proved that there was someone who did that, yeah, that would mean that you shouldn't trust your memories, or you need some new way to differentiate the reasonable ones from the unreasonable ones. I would agree. Luckily we haven't gotten that defeater yet, but we have in your case. We have the defeater in your case. It's like in your case, it would be like we've literally we've done that
because you believe that it is scientifically possible to push memories into a brain, and so for all you know, that's exactly what's happening, and they're causing you not to remember it.
Well,
And
again,
so, I
we
mean,
don't.
again, the point is, it doesn't follow from this experience is fallible in one case to this experience is fallible generally. Um, that doesn't
Right.
follow logically,
I
and
agree.
so I'm not gonna buy with what you're selling.
I
Is
I
basically what it comes down
agree.
to.
But that, like, if you have a case that can be shown to be reliable, like, then yes, you can say, oh, it's reliable in some cases, and the fact that it's wrong in this one case doesn't disprove it's wrong in every case, because we can show it's reliable in other cases. But if the only case we can show it working, or the only case we can test it, it's wrong in all of the cases, then that's a good reason to not trust it. If there hasn't been some other way that's confirmed it in some other means to show it's right ever, then we should never trust it. In order to trust it, you would first have to provide some successful means that it's done these things, and then say, oh, I'm doing, my experience of this other thing is kind of like my experience of these other successful means. And so without these other successful means, it's not trustworthy.
Yeah, I mean, that's like kind of a word salad there, but it's basically the same point. I mean, you're saying that if I can show in every case that I show that I can disprove it, that it's disproven, then therefore it's always disproven. Like, it just doesn't follow from that. I mean, presumably, on your view, you could watch the electrical activity of the brain and see it make the choice without being determined. In which case, I guess that's proof of free will, because it did it without being determined to do it. And so, again, like, what you're presenting doesn't lead to the conclusions that you're asking me to buy, and that's why I'm not buying them.
Well, I mean, it does. I'm just reciting basic neurology here and psychology. So it's the consensus again in every academic field that you're rejecting, not me. This is nothing, has nothing to do with me, but
I'm not talking
okay.
to those people. I'm just talking to you, and the information you've presented me is a non sequitur. The reason, maybe they have better reasons than what you provided.
Well, no, I'm
But what
literally
you
quoting
provided
the
doesn't lead to the
academic sources here.
conclusions.
So if you're objecting to the academic sources, not me here. So you're just saying, nope, all of
I'm
the
object-
experts are wrong,
I'm objecting to the information you've presented.
which
What you've
are
said
literally
tonight
arguments
does not
used by
follow,
the
does not lead
experts.
to the conclusions
They
that
do.
you're
They
drawing from.
literally do. So again, you're saying the experts are wrong when you're saying that. You're not saying I'm wrong because
I'm
I'm
saying
quoting
you're
them.
wrong. I mean, I'm disagreeing with you. I'm not talking to the experts.
I'm
I
quoting
don't
them.
know
So
what they
if
say or
if I
don't
say
say.
verbatim the same things they say, and you're saying, oh, your arguments don't lead to the conclusions, well, then you're saying the experts in the field, their arguments don't lead to the conclusions. Like, well, okay, if you say so.
I don't know that. I don't know what they've said or not said. I don't know that you've interpreted them correctly. I don't know. I have no idea
Well,
what
I do because I've spoken to many of them
what
and have
papers
them
you've read.
saying this on my channel. You can
What?
there are many of them saying the same thing on my channel. That's where I get them from. I've literally spoken to them on this topic.
Okay, but I mean, like I said, like what you presented tonight, it's just a non sequitur, and I've given my reasons
Okay,
for
if
thinking
you
it's a
want to
non
say
sequitur.
all of the academic papers are a non sequitur, okay, I can't argue with that.
Okay, I guess.
Do you have any other arguments or evidence?
Yeah. So I mean, like I said, moral virtues are character traits, so they're plausibly grounded in a character. I mean, it's a reasonable inference to make. I get that you're not going to go with me on that road, but it's reasonable to think that if something's personal, then it's personal, and so it predicts a personal being. And then you can look at fine tuning as well, and you can get more information about this person through fine tuning evidence.
What is the fine
Which again,
tuning evidence?
the constants and quantities that fall within narrow life permitting ranges. That's an example of specified complexity. And when we encounter specified complexity, that gives us a inference of design that comes from specified complexity.
So a few things there. Specified complexity has been literally debunked in everything in biology. It's literally
Specified
known
complexity is a word.
What?
It's a word. Can't be debunked.
Yes.
It's a word.
You
can't debunk a word.
Specified
theory.
Specified complexity is a referent to a very specific kind of thing that says that there is some level of complexity that infers specificity, which has been debunked. That entire concept by Stephen Myers and those guys is literally false. So what about the fine tuning do you think indicates design? Because I agree there's fine tuning.
Specified complexity does. And it hasn't been debunked. I mean, your bank uses it. We use it all the time. We use every time you have a password anywhere, that's specified complexity. So complexity is a bunch of things that come together and they're complex, and then they match some external pattern, and that's an implication of design.
Specified complexity is a creationist argument introduced by William Dembski and used to advocate for opponents of intelligent design.
Yeah, some people use it that way. I'm not talking about biology.
There are no other academic usages of this term.
There's no bearing on how I'm using it right now.
There are no other academic usages of the term. So what else?
To refer to your bank account.
My bank account.
Yeah, you got a PIN number? It's 4 numbers?
Sure.
So it has complexity because it's like 1 in 10,000, right?
Sure.
And it's specific to the records that your bank has on file. And so your bank takes that specified complexity to imply that that it's you, that you put those numbers in.
So every physical
It's
pattern
not
is
just a
specified.
random 4 digits that somebody put in.
So every physical pattern has specified complexity.
I didn't say that. I said that when we find specified complexity, that it gives rise to a design inference, and we experience that um, all the time in our lives. Through passwords, like your bank account is an example, or I can give you another thought experiment that are examples. But I mean, I think you know what I mean by specified complexity. I
I have
hope you
no
do.
idea what you mean by that. So to me, how is
So
like
something
what
is
is the
complex.
analogy between the constants of the universe and my bank account?
So your bank account is an example of specified complexity. Something is complex if it's a bunch of things that are put together, makes it complex. Specified if it's specific to some external standard, like your bank's records of what your PIN is. Specified complexity. And part of it as well that there's not a connection between the two. So your bank account doesn't cause your PIN to be entered at the grocery store or wherever.
All right, I'm not following the connection to fine tuning here. So I agree that there is, if we changed any of the constants of physics slightly, then life wouldn't exist. I agree. That can be fully explained by a random process, a random selection factor, or it could be explained by determined physics. There's no evidence that indicates a designer. I don't see how you get to a designer from that.
Well, so the problem with determined physics is that the fundamental laws, that they are fundamental. We don't have further laws beneath them that predict the constants and quantities that fall in those laws. So there's not like a law underneath the law of gravity that predicts the value of G.
Well, every physicist disagrees with that one, but
No, they don't.
yeah, they
I mean,
do.
Luke Barnes, for example, is a physicist who doesn't agree with that.
I'm pretty sure he does. Like
there are constants and
gravity is an
quantities.
emergent property of space-time bending. It's literally caused by space-time bending. There's no one thinks gravity is literally itself a fundamental force. It's like a thing caused by quantum Hilbert space field interactions.
Yeah, so that, I mean, you can. I'm not getting into the physics of the experiment of waves with you for gravity. I think that's more complex than we need to get into right now. But the point is that these constants and quantities, there's not a law beneath them that determines their values. That's the point.
String theory, okay, debunked.
String theory doesn't debunk it because string theory predicts 10 to the 500 possible worlds. And so
yeah, but it predicts that there are things under gravity that determine it, like literally the opposite of what you said.
Well, if string theories, and that demonstrates why I think that's not a good objection, because you have fine tuning in these constants and quantities. If you predict an inanimate or like a law beneath it, that law is just as likely to be fine tuned as the constants and quantities. In the case that you have examples that you presented string theory, that's just as that's just as fine tuned as the constants and quantities, because again, there's all these different options, and so you end up just kicking the can down the road a step. You don't actually get rid of the fine tuning that way.
Oh, sure. So seems like you're just kicking the can down the road when you say it's a designer, because the designer must be equally as fine tuned as the thing it designed.
No, not at all. I mean, if it's God, then it's a simple object. It's not complex.
Okay,
So
well, then string theory is a simple object and not complex.
Simple object can't express specified complexity because it's not complex.
Okay, that doesn't make any sense. But so yeah, we can say that there is a necessary physical field, and that's a far better explanation than a God because it's far simpler. God must necessarily be designed. Like, why is God fine-tuned in such a way that his nature would produce this kind of a universe as opposed to a different kind of universe? Maybe there's a God who only wants black holes or unicorns or puppies. And so for every different possible way the universe could be, there's a possible God who could want it to be that way. Therefore, God is equally as fine-tuned as the universe because something must have determined his nature to be such that it would create exactly this kind of a fine-tuned universe.
Yeah, so like that, there's kind of two problems with that. Again, and this is what you were saying before, is you're saying that in order to recognize an explanation is correct, you have to have an explanation of the explanation. Because you have to have an explanation of the designer in order to recognize the designer designed the universe. The problem with that is at least an infinite regress of explanations, because in order to recognize this explanation, you have to have an explanation of it. But in order to recognize that explanation, you have to have an explanation of that, and so on, and ad infinitum. And so that's not a very good way to evaluate explanations. It's patently obvious that you don't have to have an explanation of an explanation in order to recognize it. That's the first problem. The second one is the God is not complex, and so he doesn't exhibit specified complexity. He doesn't exhibit fine tuning. There's not a specific way that he's put together like a composite object. There's not different ways that he could have been put together. And you might have different concepts of God, but God has mutually exclusive traits. And part of the concept of God is that he exists necessarily. That is, he exists in all possible worlds. So there's literally not a different way that God could have been.
Okay, so the first thing is you said that there are multiple ways it could be put together. So there's obviously multiple ways God could be put together. God could want a universe of only puppies. He didn't want that, so that's a different way God could be put together.
That's not put together. That's having a different desire.
Yes, so it has a property with a different variable.
Things.
The property, different variable.
That's not fine tuning.
Yes, it is. It's literally the same thing. So it's like saying gravitational constant could be greater or lesser. God could want more puppies or less puppies.
Right, but so there's specified complexity where you've got like just the gravitation, you've got cosmological, you got all these different values, and they're complex.
Like God's nature. God's nature is more complex than all of those things.
Not at all. God's nature is simple. He's a simple object. I mean, there's not another way to explain it. He's not a composite object. He's not composed in a particular way.
If he has one desire as opposed to another, that's literally
God that you're objecting to is just not the concept of God of Christianity.
So literally, your argument is defeated if there's a variation in the way God could be, just like there's a variation in the way the cosmological constant could be. So if God could want puppies and the cosmological constant could be greater, those are equivalent one-to-one correlations. There is a one-to-one correlation between those two things. So whether you call it whatever word you want to label it makes no difference. There is one value that leads to this universe and one value that leads to a different one universe. So those are exactly the same in levels of complexity.
Yeah, I don't see that at all. I don't see how that connects at all. I mean, saying that God could want different things is the same as saying that all the constants and quantities are finely tuned for conscious embodied life. I mean, that just doesn't connect for me.
Okay, so the reason the universe.
I'm running a little low on time, by the way. I just to let you know.
Oh yeah, sure. How much time do you have left? I want to be respectful of your time.
Just like a few minutes.
Okay, so yeah, just to summarize, the reason the constants are fine-tuned is because if you change them, life would not happen. So there's a very select few of the things that would result in conscious life. So if there's a very select few of the way God desires could result in conscious life, then it is by definition also finely tuned. But that would be the summary of the argument. Thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate your time. I enjoyed conversation with you, even if it got a little heated sometimes. I'm fine with that. Do you want to give a shout out to where people can find your information and your debate coffee thing?
Yeah. So again, it's still changing a bit as far as like the format and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a work in progress, but you can find me at coffeeshopapologetics.com.
Awesome. Thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to start the after show, so you can just close the screen whenever you're ready.
All right. Thanks. Later.
Have a nice day. All right, guys, let's go to after show. Where should we do it? Which server? Try politics. Check PNR too. See if anyone's in my room. Nobody yet. Eyebrow mango. Thank you, John Pelosi. Congrats on the 10K hair. Appreciate it. Hey, Frank, do you know how to do are you a mod in this one yet?
No. No, I'm not. So I wish I could just add everyone like I do on our server, but
who is, you know who are? I think it's Taco, Scotty, Jack Burton, I think is Scotty. I need somebody to do who knows how to do the, what's it, like a announcement thingy.
If you somehow figure out how to make me a mod, I could do that for you.
Awesome. Canadian, do you know how to do announcements in this server? Can you do an announcement that I'm doing like an after show here?
In this server?
Yeah.
What do you mean, like at everyone? I don't know if I have that power.
Or I just tell a mod and have them post it because they usually are willing to do that. Say I'm, or I don't know.
Just tag admins.
Hi, TJump.
Hey, how's it going, Lilith?
You have a channel named. You have a whole like channel name. Who are you?
I am a potato.
Fair enough.
Yes, I have a YouTube channel.
Let me look at your YouTube to see.
You remember you're a potato, or are you actually a potato?
I am actually a potato. I'm
Can
ontologically.
you rationally prove that you're a potato?
Yes.
You don't
Yes.
just remember yourself being a potato.
Thank you, Mr. Matt, for the super chat. Appreciate it. Yes, I can rationally prove I'm a potato because a potato is the greatest possible being, and I am the greatest possible being, and I exist in all possible worlds. Therefore, I'm a potato.
He's a potato with pink hair.
Yes.
Potato with pink hair.
Yep. I dyed my hair for getting 10K subs on my YouTube channel, so it's pink now.
10K subs, damn.
Watching that guy move backwards was quite entertaining.
Alright, so I see this stream is called Evidence for God.
Yes, because I usually have interviews and then I have after shows. This is the after show. So I had an interview with Mr. Matt. He has a Discord channel, and thank you, Canadian, for the CA $1. So I had an interview with him, and now I'm doing an after show. That is my.
I'll give you money right now. Hold on.
Yes, I love that. You're my favorite person ever.
Hold up.
That's right, Maniac. I'm a maximally potato. Start using the arguments for God to prove things. Or what is it, Darth Dawkins? The preconditions for intelligibility. You must presuppose a potato for the preconditions of intelligibility. Hey, Canadian, you got anything planned? Any interesting interviews coming up?
Yeah, many. I have one tomorrow.
With who?
I'm sending you money right now, TJump. Hold on.
Thank you. Thank you for the super chat, Jay Ritchie. Interchangeable hair proves Mr. Potato Head. Yes. I am Mr. Potato Head.
Probably one of the most famous
Oh
apologists.
my god, they're making Mr. Potato Head gender neutral. This is the worst shit ever. Literally 1984.
Canadian, what did you say? Famous apologist, William Lane Craig?
No, well, not quite, but Greg Kukul. You guys should know him.
Ah, yes, I have met him several times.
I actually went to one of the largest apologetics conference in America.
I think you mentioned that last time, and
last Saturday.
you met J. Warner Wallace, right?
Yes, I did.
I own so many books from J. Warner Wallace.
I actually have a person of interest.
Person of interest?
Hold on.
Oh, I also had Bart Ehrman on. If you guys care about Bart Ehrman, I don't know.
I'm sending you $5 right now. Hold up, it's loading.
Thank you, angels from Africa. I appreciate it. I got it.
Send.
Yes.
Sent.
As long as you're angels from Africa, that is you, I believe, with the trumpet guys. Or no, you're Lilith.
No, that's
Lilith.
not me.
The way that can be named is not the eternal way. Thank you for the super chat, Lilith.
The way that can be named is not the eternal way. The name that can be named is not the eternal name.
So yeah, I've actually also gone to a lot of big apologetics conferences. I've met J. Warner Wallace and Greg Kogle and Tim Stratton, or Tim Burton, Tim Bennett. Barnett, that's it. Thank you.
The bald guy.
Yep.
I was there and I handed out Ayn Rand books to everyone.
That's hilarious. Did you record yourself?
No.
That would be a great video. Like going to an apologetics
I didn't
conference.
record myself.
Ugh.
I didn't. But what I did is I just walked up to all the speakers and I handed them Virtue of Selfishness by Ayn Rand. Because there's a bookstore that sells them for 80 cents
Oh wow.
where I'm from. Yeah. You can go get all the like small little Ayn Rand books for like 80 cents at that store. It's awesome.
All Americans were given their
Thank you, Patrick Brownfield, for the super chat. It's the precondition for potato gullibility. Yes, exactly. We need a potato Dawkins. We just need to take like the voice recordings of Darth Dawkins and just switch out God for potato.
Isn't that Kent Hovind?
So,
Darth Dawkins.
TJump, are you a fan of the flying spaghetti monster Sky Daddy?
Yes, Pastafarianism is the one true religion.
Pastafarianism. So what is your channel like about? Like, what do you do?
I wrote an epistemology and model of morality, which was the start of my YouTube channel, and I contrast them to religious epistemology and morality by inviting on professors and philosophers, usually from different colleges in apologetics, to have conversations with me about the evidence and arguments for God and about morality. And so that is the foundation of my channel. So I debate
So,
God stuff. Thank you, Canadian, for the super chat. How do you...
Do you believe in objective morality?
Yes, I do believe in objective morality. How do you improve your relationship with God? There's so many ways to answer that question, like drown babies. Eat him.
Well, see, that depends. All right, look, all right. So if you want the best possible sacrifice, what you're gonna want to do is a baby's blood is gonna be more untainted, and the intention behind sacrificing a baby to be better than like a also a virgin woman would also work because of the intention behind it. Now what you're gonna want to do is draw the sigil for whatever god you're sacrificing to into the stomach of the person you're sacrificing, and you're gonna want to use a ritual knife and charge it with some kind of chant.
That's not how the gods that I worship work. They more prefer like imaginary sacrifices, not real ones. Canadian, what did you had something to add to your comment? Thank you, Sigma Annie, for the super chat.
How do you get closer to God? How do you feel close?
Like, are you asking like a serious question kind of thing?
That's you. Like you feel far from God, so how do you feel better and closer?
I don't know. I don't know how to answer that because I don't ever feel. Like, for me to feel close to God, I'd have to believe he existed. And for me to believe he existed, he'd have to interact with me in some way and, like, answer prayers or something.
You're far from God, so the question is, now, how do you get closer?
So for me to believe God exists, or I'd have to have a personal relationship. So he'd have to, like...
How do you improve your relationship? Your relationship is broken. How do you improve that?
Well, the first thing is to have a relationship to begin with. So I have to actually believe there is a being. I have to, like... interact with them. That would be the first step.
Okay, so why aren't you interacting then? I don't know. You answered your own question.
Well, God isn't like talking to me or answering prayers or anything. Like, I'm happy to pray. I'm happy to try as many times as you want.
God answers your prayers, but not on your will, on his will.
Well, he didn't like give me an answer. Like, nothing happened. So nothing happening wouldn't be like, he'd have to actually like speak to me. If he said no, that'd be fine, but some interaction would be a good first step. Sigma Innie.
TJump, I'm not going to answer your prayers.
God, you're a mod here, right? You're a mod in my server thingy here.
Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to make Frank one too. Canadian probably fine.
TJump, I have a question.
You got to ask the administrators of this server for that power, because I don't have that particular power.
Gotcha. So Sigma Annie, thank you for the super chat. Primarily due to potato, however, must also be considered with the respect to potato, ergo potato. Yes, potato.
TJump, I have a question. What rights are there?
Like the moral principle, I think, is it should be impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. That should be the moral principle.
Based? That's based.
Yeah, so I think that would be the perfect world. Would be one is where it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing.
How about a society completely based on consent, where no legal coercion can be enacted against any individual?
Yes, that would be.
It's called anarchism.
Problem is, it's not pragmatic. So, like, if we enacted that, more people would die, and so there are justified immoral actions.
Like, by definition, not true. Because if it's a society where no legal coercion can be enacted against any individual, that means that that would lessen in a pragmatic sense. That would because the idea would be to stop coercion, and murder would be less because the idea is to stop coercion, and you can achieve this through a private law society.
Well, we had those, and then the guy with the biggest stick started to kill everyone and take everything. That's kind of how most of human
the good old
society.
warlords will take over argument.
Because
He's
I mean
doing
that's
the meme, guys.
kind of how history worked for the first 2 million years of human history.
There's never been a private law society before.
No, me and my gay husband will be able to grow weed
No.
and we'll be able to fuck each other and have guns and it all will be.
No.
Got his ass muted.
So like
Actually,
like
my
what do you
my
mean by
Dallas
you said we've
top-
never had a private authority
private
society?
law society?
Private law society. So like what would that be? How is that different from, for example, tribes, American Indian tribes or pygmy tribes?
Alright, I can run you through the process.
Sure.
All right, so basically, we have let's say we have a dispute between me and you, right?
Yeah.
Say, you know, I was supposed to do this for you, I didn't. We had a contract, I violated it. I say I didn't. You know, dispute, right? So we try to solve the issue, can't solve it. So we try to get a mediator for this issue. All right. So we both find a mediator. All right. I give you a list of 20 well-known mediators that have a reputation of being fair and objective, and we pick from the list. Okay?
Wait, what if we
So
don't agree on
pick from the
mediators?
list, we get a mediator.
What if we don't agree on
All right.
mediators?
What?
What if we don't agree on mediators? So if you provide mediators, I say I don't want any of those.
Sure,
Yo.
okay. Well, then that would be then you just wouldn't be able to represent. Okay. So if you publicly make a all right. So if you say, right, no, I don't agree to this mediator. Then if I go to so it depends. Are we having a situation? You want a situation where legal action should be taken, or a situation where you just want a problem resolved?
I have no idea. I'm asking questions about your model. So I'm
Sure.
thinking about.
Let's to go further into this.
Thank you for the
already,
super chat,
let's,
Patrick
jump-
Brownfield. This bald guy lolls at your quote from Kings. I love it. Yes. Second Kings
Actually,
224.
A much better scenario for this is say all right, say
Say
you
a
steal
person
my
murdered
TV.
somebody else. So one guy murdered somebody else. The other family's like, this guy murdered you. How do they do that? How do they deal with that?
I was already had, so say like I'm gonna start with theft real quick. All right, say you steal from me, right?
Okay.
Right, I don't you know, I have a pretty good idea that it's you because I wasn't able to catch you myself, but I saw you like running away with the TV and I'm pretty sure it's you. So I march down to your house and I say, I saw you stealing that TV, and then I see the TV in there and you obviously are gonna deny it. You're like, no man, I got this 3 months ago, blah, 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 make up excuses, blah. So we have to get it. So I have to get a resolution. So I try to find a judge, right? So I make an accusation towards you. I give you a list of 20 judges, and I say, if you're so confident that you didn't steal my TV, prove it to a reputable judge. Here's a list of 20 reputable judges within
Reputable?
a 15-minute driving radius.
So I reject all the judges. Now what?
Say you say no. Okay, sure. Say you say no. All right. And I take it to a judge, all right, and you don't get to represent yourself. Right? So I take it to a judge and you don't get to represent yourself. And so obviously the judge is just going to say, "Oh, well, yeah, I believe in your case. I believe your case." So I then take that whatever paper thing statement by the reputable judge, and I go and take it to a security agency, or like basically like a security agency to be able to go retrieve the TV for me. I take it to them. I show them the statement. They go into your house and retrieve the TV and give it back to me.
How is this different from American Indian societies? Because that's exactly what they did. They had the tribe of elders who were the judges, and if you had a dispute, you went to the tribe of elders and pleaded your case, and if you lost the case, they'd send the warriors to take your TV.
Hey, TJump, can I ask you
Okay, I
something?
gotta go.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey,
Go ahead,
TJump.
Mango. How's it going?
Do you believe in global warming?
Yes.
So if global warming exists, why do banks offer 30-year mortgages?
Because
If we all
global
know
warming.
that the world,
Wait,
if we all know that,
it's a legitimate
if we all
question,
know
but
that the globe is going to end according to global
Possibly
warming.
the most brainless question I've ever heard.
well, no, it's a completely legitimate question. Hold up. So like
No, it's actually a valid question in a
so
way.
like global warming will not end the world in 30 years. Therefore, it's perfectly legitimate to offer 30-year loans because it'll be longer than 30 years before the world ends.
According to many global warming activists,
Name one.
They claim that the Earth has only a few years left.
Name one.
Wait, no, that's fine. Wait, hold up. So banks don't make decisions based off. Hold up.
No, but banks.
One sec. Hold on. So banks don't make decisions based off what activists believe. They make decisions based off what like the experts and scientists believe. So even if an activist says the world's going to end in a few years, no one cares. The banks don't listen. They care what the scientists say.
Global warming is a hoax. Then it's not even real.
No, therefore you're a fucking
Even
moron.
if global warming annihilated all life on Earth in 30 years, banks would still offer 30-year loans for another 20 years because they still get interest payments.
It's the biggest bull crap ever.
No, they would still do it because they'd still make money.
How are you still this fucking stupid?
Up until people stop buying houses.
All right.
Global warming exists, and the solution is privatization.
Wait, what?
Apparently, the answer to global warming is banks.
Okay, look, I want to touch on another point before I go. TJump, is science based on making a statement and then trying to prove that that statement is not false?
Usually it's the other way around. So people make a statement and then try to disprove it.
That's exactly what I just said.
Well, you said prove it's not false. So proving it's not false will be proving it's true.
No, they make a statement and try to prove it false.
And that's...
No, they don't. They make a statement trying to see whether or not this is not false.
No.
Well, yeah, they run a bunch of tests to try to falsify it, and if it comes back not falsified, that means it's it's proven.
Right. It's a
So
stronger idea.
Well, it's empirically quote unquote proven, but you can't know truth.
They begin with a false statement. They begin with a false statement.
No, they begin with a statement.
Wait, they begin with a false statement. So like 1 + 1 = 7?
Because they have no evidence to support.
That doesn't make it false. Wait, hold up. No, I can go. Look, if I say, all right, so say I'm back in like the in like BC, all right, and everyone thinks that the Earth is flat, right? And I say it's round. I have no proof that it's round, but I say it's.
Did she leave?
Oh, right.
I'm
right here. Look,
No,
it's
not
a
you.
false statement. It's a false
Can I-
statement.
I ask
If you
a
don't
question?
have evidence, it's a false statement.
Yes, the guy who wanted to ask a question. What question did you want to ask?
Yeah, I was just wondering, like, with your moral view, like, how do you get around like the is-ought problem?
There are no oughts. Problem solved.
But like, aren't moral statements oughts though? You're
No.
saying the world ought to be this way.
No. So there's hypothetical oughts and categorical oughts. Categorical oughts are saying that there's some force in the universe that we ought to do something. That's not the case. Hypothetical oughts are once we know something is moral, then we humans say we ought to do it. But the oughts have nothing to do with morality. So we can prove that oughts have nothing to do with morality. They're not in the morality itself, because you can ask, is something moral because you ought to do it, or ought you do it because it's moral? And try to answer that for yourself if you want.
Hey, TJump, is it possible to manipulate DNA in order to support false evidence, false arguments, false statements?
Yes. Like, we have
So
court
if you
cases
want-
on this
if
all the
somebody
time.
wanted- If
I'm
somebody wanted to prove that evolution, quote unquote, evolution existed, and they manipulated DNA in order to falsify the existence of evolution, is that possible?
Is it possible to manipulate DNA to falsify the evidence of evolution?
No, peer review.
Probably not, because that would involve a multinational conspiracy on a scale we've never seen. And
For
the ability
100
of
years.
humans to pull that
We've done it
off is
before.
vanishingly small.
We've done it before.
Hello, TJump. This is Agent here. What's up?
Hey, how's it going?
My favorite argument against conspiracies of that magnitude is Bill Clinton. We can't keep a blowjob between two people secret.
So because
my God.
listen,
all of
TJump
my
thinks that a finite-
quote unquote conspiracies come from the central bank.
This guy watches
TJump
Federal- Federal Reserve?
TJump believes that a finite limited. Do you believe
Question,
in a
TJ.
Yeah, go
do
for
you
it.
believe
What do
in
you
a
define
finite
as a
limited-
god?
What do I
basically, in your mind?
define as a god? I define a god as a non-physical mind that created everything else, essentially.
So it could basically mean it's an entity, consequence, person, conscience, or literally an event that you can call God that or makes our reality.
No, a
What if the
conscious,
whole
a
universe
non.
is God?
Well, I said so. It's a non-physical consciousness, so it has to have a conscious experience, a qualia, and it created everything else. It can't just be an
Quick
event.
question: why does this have to be non-conscious, basically?
Well, you asked what I define as a god, so I define a god as having consciousness.
Okay, so my follow-up question after that is, so basically, with knowledge and with scientific finding, basically through time, we can pretty much achieve anything right now.
No, but go ahead.
Well, I mean, with an proper amount of time, you could fabricate technology or the understanding of our reality. Like that's our purpose, if you want. Like just to give knowledge to the next generation. Like
It's not our purpose.
intelligence is a byproduct of giving off knowledge.
I mean, I could give myself that purpose.
I don't understand what you're saying here. So even if we have technology in the future, we could do almost everything. That doesn't mean we couldn't create a god, because we'd have to create something that created us.
No, I'm not talking about creating a god yet. Like I'm just talking about with time and technology and understanding of our reality, we could basically saturate the point of knowledge.
What does that mean? Saturate a point of knowledge.
Saturate the point of knowledge is where there's an event or entity or consciousness that basically understands the whole fabric of reality, because that's the purpose of knowledge. Understand our reality, how it works.
Sort of. So we can get to a point where we know most things. I don't think we'll be able to solve Gödel's incompleteness theorem in that way, but sure. Let's go with that.
I mean, like 100 years back, just
Well,
saying
yes.
that
So
we're
I
gonna
agree. I
populate
agree.
Mars was like unconventional.
I agree. Knowledge is increasing. Yes, our scope of knowledge is increasing.
TJump, you said that obviously science has difficulty trying to explain the origins of existence.
No, it doesn't have it doesn't have a problem. What I'm trying to say, basically, because
He wasn't talking
really my
about.
first language.
Well, he wasn't referring to what you were saying. He was bringing up a different point.
Yeah, so science has difficulty trying to explain the existence of the
Big Bang,
the
origin of
origins
everything.
existence. If we were able to explain the origins of existence, what do you think is going to happen next?
Well, it's not to find out the origin of existence. It's just to understand how our reality works right
I'm
now.
not responding to you.
Physics.
Who the hell's asking you?
So like once we
My
get
question was on that. Sorry.
so once we explain the origin of reality, that doesn't make a difference to what happens next. Like it's not going to change anything about what happens
It
next.
does,
Or do you mean
because
afterlife?
What happens next is you try to be like the creator, and
What?
you try to alter reality.
What are you smoking, my friend?
A lot, bro.
Me, a lot, but
I mean, if you look at the way babies are being born, the division that the scientists have for the ways in which
TJump, I
babies
have
are
a
born.
question.
No.
Can you stop interrupting me?
No. Anybody else have any questions?
I got one and a follow up.
Go ahead.
Yeah, because I got a follow up on like my train of thought.
Deuces, I think Deuces had a question. He hasn't had a chance
Yeah.
yet. Go ahead.
The other day, I think it was like 4 days ago, you were talking to a guy about evidence for God, and I caught the end of it. you guys were talking about. He was saying, "Would you believe in a God if some miraculous thing?" And you said, "No, it'd have to be repeatable."
Yep.
So, supposing somebody was able to demonstrate a repeatable miracle to you, how would that change your beliefs on the matter?
That would be evidence towards whatever god they used or thing they used to do the miracles.
Now, that doesn't mean that you would adopt the entire religion wholesale, though, right?
Yeah. So like you could prove the Christian God existed, but I wouldn't worship the Christian God because he's a mass murderer. So I'd believe he existed if you proved he existed, but I wouldn't worship him.
So I guess the follow-up is, supposing that this God could be demonstrated to exist using that criteria, is there anything that would make you go even further and accept the whole thing?
If he created the best of all possible worlds, be about it.
TJump, I have a question about that. So if the Christian God was proven to be true, would Satan be the morally right, or
Yes.
or Lucifer really?
Well, I mean,
So
he wouldn't be the morally right one. He'd be less immoral than God, but I think he's amoral. Like Satan didn't do anything wrong when he wanted to be God. There's not an evil. He did kill.
Well, the Gnostic interpretation is he didn't. It's not that he wanted to be God; is that he wanted to overthrow the immoral authority of God, because he saw what he was doing as wrong.
Yeah, so maybe that could be the case. So if that was the case, then maybe he would be moral as long as he didn't do the whole thing to Job's family, because that's immoral. Because that's in the Bible. I think that's the only immoral thing that Satan
That was
did.
actually Satan, not Lucifer. Sorry, I meant to say Lucifer. So Lucifer, the Prince of Pride.
Sure.
Is your real last name Jump?
Yes.
You were actually born with a name like Tom Jump.
Yep.
Hey Tom,
Hey,
I got a question for you, man.
TJump, I have a question.
Mango,
Oh,
you've
sorry,
already
I
had
think I
like 6
interrupted
turns. So Angels, did you have a question?
Yeah. Hey, I just wanted to say I'm a big fan of your channel, man.
Thanks, appreciate
for,
it.
the content. So I had a argument earlier today on the server about the definition of atheism, and someone was trying to convince me that atheism is the position or the belief that there are no gods, and they referred me to a site on the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy.
Yep.
Where it defines atheism as
Yeah, that's
that
in philosophy.
God does not exist.
Yeah, in philosophy, the term atheism means God does not exist. So in the academic philosophy, they usually use atheism to mean that predominantly. In colloquial language, people use it to mean a lack of belief in God.
Okay,
Right.
so I was just confused about that because I mean, what's the
Hold up! Don't interrupt. Go ahead,
so
Angels.
it's one of those words that's like versatile, like it can have different meanings and still be correct.
Yes,
No,
all
you could say
words
agnostic.
have that. So like, yes,
I
it
can't
is
hear you.
perfectly legitimate to say that you're an atheist and you simply lack belief. That's perfectly reasonable definition. If you want to use the philosophical definition, you can. You can just say I'm using the philosophical definition and I believe God does not exist. That's reasonable too. But it's up to you to define your position. You can define it however you prefer to define it. It's not wrong to use atheism as a lack of belief. It's totally fine to do that.
What do you mean by
thanks.
God?
Personally, I'd say if you want to use the philosophical definitions, say you're a weak atheist.
That would not be a philosophical definition, because weak and
That
strong
doesn't work.
atheism is a very minority position. The weak, strong, that's a few philosophers have used that, but it's not like a well accepted distinction.
Just use the word agnostic. Simple.
TJump. So you're an atheist, right? Not an agnostic.
Yep.
How are you sure there's no creator?
Well, I don't need to be sure. There's two things. So one, I can be an atheist and simply lack belief, but I think that all ideas in human imagination start off as imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. And so until evidence is presented for any given idea, it's more rational to conclude it's just something in somebody's imagination. So until evidence is provided for God, it's rational to conclude it's just something people made up.
I got a follow up on that. Like right away, I can reformulate better. Like sorry, because English is not really my strong suit. Right away, our understanding, like your thoughts right now, is because of evolution. Basically, like your intelligence with knowledge through time is who you are now, right?
What?
Like your intelligence, basically your level, like all your knowledge is just due to evolution and your surrounding. Like everything's a
Sort
factor.
of.
Evolution never happened.
Yes, so far. Like
Sort of,
that's
yeah.
okay. Well, if you add infinity as a factor of time, at which point there will be a saturation of knowledge where you will know everything about
What is
reality
this?
due to all the time before that.
No,
So
that doesn't
why not?
follow.
Why not? No, because I'm just talking about our evolution of us, or just the universe as a whole. If you add infinity as a factor of time, you can create a saturation of knowledge.
No, that doesn't
What?
follow. That doesn't follow.
Well, what I mean by saturation of knowledge is a being that understands the fabric of reality
It
to the
doesn't follow.
point.
That literally
Wait,
does not follow.
okay, doesn't follow?
No. So like
Okay.
there are different sizes of infinite. So even if you add an infinite, like if I was going to live infinitely in the future, I wouldn't have all knowledge. Like I still couldn't go back in time and know things about, like, did Jesus rise from the dead or whatever. Even if I lived infinitely far into the future, that wouldn't give me all knowledge in the universe because there's also an infinite
No,
past.
I'm not talking about a person. I'm talking. It could be a race. It could be a civilization.
It doesn't matter.
The
Like,
same problem still applies.
if all human beings all lived infinitely far into the future and they continued to multiply and all of their kids lived infinitely far into the future,
not
they
just
wouldn't have.
humankind, I'm
Hold up,
talking
hold up,
about
hold up, hold up, hold up.
intelligence.
All intelligent beings all lived infinitely into the future. They'd still never know everything because there's an infinite past where we didn't exist. So we would still never know everything. Thank you guys for the haircut, Mr. Boss and Mac the Human.
Know
Appreciate
about
it.
history, right? But know about the reality, like technology-wise, you will be able to travel galaxies. You'll be able to reproduce matter. At one point, the saturation of knowledge, where you can basically do what you want to your imagination's extent. That's where I say the saturation of knowledge, where basically you could
What if
create new
industrial
reality.
society collapses?
Well,
Even
it can
if
collapse
humans
and
did live forever,
start from nothing.
there's the whole idea of privacy. Like I could do something in my own home in sealed conditions, and this infinite forever knowledge of humans going into the future wouldn't know what my fart smelled like, for example.
Everyone
Like,
will now know
doesn't
what G's
describe
first smell like.
reality. That's not information that's pertinent.
Wait,
if you
so
want.
I think what he's saying is that
Actually,
we
are
will
gonna build a time machine and
understand.
go back and smell your
Wait. I think he understand. I think he's saying that as we gain in technology, we will understand more about the foundational physics of reality.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Yes.
Okay.
But if you add infinity as a factor of time, what point does the saturation of knowledge happen?
What saturation? What do you mean by saturation?
Still don't get what he's
Saturation of
trying to
knowledge
get at.
is when you know the whole books of physics. If that's a good metaphor, because
So are you saying
there's
that
gonna
when
be
every
an end
person
page.
are you asking when does every person know all of the fundamental physics?
Well, doesn't need to be a person; could be a collective.
I don't
Because
care. It
that
doesn't. It
amount of
doesn't.
knowledge
Any
would be
consciousness. Any
unheard
consciousness
of.
doesn't matter. Any consciousness. So, are you asking what point will any consciousness know all of the fundamental physics?
Exactly.
I have no idea. It depends on what it is. Like we could know
Why
it
is
tomorrow.
this question important?
Well, at that point, if you want to understand reality, the next question would be to create one. If you have the knowledge to make one.
Sure, we would probably create universes if we could.
Well, not us. I'm talking about an entity with the saturation
Sure,
of
an
knowledge.
entity
It's the
probably
end
would.
point,
So what?
like the end goal.
Is this nigga on meth?
Maybe.
I think he's trying to get to God because he's trying to get
How
to
much
like being that
what weed are you smoking? Because I want some.
Well, it's just a definition through pure logic. I'm just looking us through
You're
time.
trying to get to God,
And I'm
aren't you?
trying to put the ladder at an infinite scale and see how far it goes.
Yeah,
What
so
is
we
the
gain
intelligent
knowledge.
factor? How
hey,
far
TJump.
does the saturation of knowledge goes?
Yes, we gain knowledge. We will create universes. Next.
Hey TJump, is your objective morality, does that apply to all creatures, all things?
All
But yeah,
consciousness.
if we create
Hey,
the
don't
basically
interrupt.
realities,
Don't
we've
interrupt.
got
Don't interrupt.
multiple
Stop
gods.
interrupting.
Hold up. Yes. My morality applies to all consciousnesses.
All
Wait.
consciousnesses. What about the unconscious?
They're not moral agents.
I would disagree.
How would you define a moral agent then?
A conscious thing.
Right.
I would disagree that morality applies to all things conscious. I think morality only applies to people with the a priori knowledge of property.
I
Because the
disagree.
only rights
I think
the only rights
animals.
that exist are property rights.
I think animals all should also have rights, and anything with intelligence.
Should or
yes.
do?
I do.
And you also believe in that? Do you believe in determinism? Is that correct?
Yes.
Oh, and sorry.
So if
my
you
bad,
think that
I
everything
got
is
a-
determined, why is it objective morality or the definition of an objective morality necessary?
Because it doesn't matter if things are determined; things can still be moral.
Irrespective of whether something is moral or not, it's irrespective because everything's determined.
No, because my definition of moral doesn't matter if things are determined. Like, I think that the perfect moral universe is a world where it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. It doesn't matter if people are like, if I'm determined to like chocolate ice cream, that's fine.
To that conclusion?
That goes against your fundamental principles.
No, it doesn't.
Of
So
determinism.
No, it doesn't.
Are you
TJump.
claiming to know TJump's principles better than him? Are you psychic?
So
Can I
I have
smoke
a
it too?
Yeah, go ahead,
question.
Lilith.
Sorry,
What was your
go ahead.
question?
Yeah. So do you think that correct me if I'm wrong, but do you think that we shouldn't the reason why we shouldn't force anyone to do anything that they don't consent to doing is because it's impossible to want something to happen to you that you don't consent to?
What? Sort of?
I kind of get what she's saying. I would say
It's kind of
it
it's
is
the
possible.
anti-frustration. It's the anti-frustrationist view, basically.
Oh, and I got the perfect analogy for my saturation of knowledge.
I want to keep talking about her question for a moment, please.
Yeah, I
Okay,
just
sure.
I want to know, like, because what you're basically describing is ethical voluntarism, and I
Yep.
want to know how did you come to ethical voluntarism?
I looked at the patterns in moral intuition and moral progress, and I tried to make a principle to describe the pattern in those things. And the principle I came to is that any involuntary imposition of consent is immoral.
Why is it immoral?
I'm looking at the patterns in the things we refer to as morality, moral intuition, moral progress, and I define the principle that describes that pattern. So if we're looking at things that we call morality, moral intuition, moral progress, we call those are the things
Things that humans create, like made up.
No, those are things we feel. So they're feelings, and we experience them, and we use the word moral to refer to those things. And is there a pattern in those things? Yes, there is a pattern in those things. And that pattern indicates it's probably not just something we made up. It's probably something more than that. Because especially if we see the pattern in other aliens, other species, artificial intelligences, if this pattern exists in all conscious agents, then it's definitely not something we made up. And what is this pattern? We'll give it a principle to describe the pattern. And I think the principle I used is the one that describes the pattern.
Jump, I think you have the right idea, but are coming to the wrong conclusion.
I think he's
Right?
on the right track, though.
Yeah,
but,
he's on the right track. No, he's definitely on the right track. That's the right track,
What
right?
what is the
Those
wrong conclusion?
fundamentals that underlie morality, those exist in simplest things like game theory, which basically shows at very basic levels that cooperation works better than outright competition.
Well, what I was more getting at is that what you're seeing the pattern is humans inherit a priori understanding of property, and that comes to self-ownership, and that's the reason why violating someone's consent is wrong, because they're self-owners.
Yeah, it doesn't.
Right?
I don't think that makes any sense. Like, because a priori
I
property
can
rights
explain.
can apply to like anything. I own other people. Like, you could say that depending on your a priori property rights. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. So you basically, property is or property rights is having the entitlement of control over something, a tangible thing.
Life is like a
Yeah, who did that? Anyway, so what I'm getting at is basically that humans have an a priori understanding of ownership of property, and since we know how, like, from birth we have a good sense of what is ours. Now we may not have a good sense of what is other people's, but we do have a good sense of what is ours. We have this a priori knowledge of ownership in our heads, right? And how we come to own ourselves is because there's only two ways you can legitimately own property, and that is either through the homesteading principle or through voluntary transaction. And since your body is unowned, you homestead it. So to homestead, you have to put work into something with intention to own. And since we have you have to have the a priori knowledge of ownership to be able to have the intention to own. So
I don't think any of those are a priori concepts. None of those. Those are all things, social constructions we've made up about property rights. None of those are.
But they're not. They're a priori.
How are they a priori?
Because it's knowledge gained outside of experience.
How is it things you know just by thinking about it? Like, making stuff up isn't knowledge you gain just by thinking about it. Like,
It's
if I
not
say
making stuff up. Like, okay, for example, no, what I'm saying is like, it is all the concept of like the homesteading that comes from like ethics, which comes from rationalism, rational deduction, right?
well, no, it
Okay.
doesn't. Oh, property rights don't come from rational deduction. There's no a priori knowledge that can get you to property rights.
Sure, there is. It's very
How?
simple. You cannot disprove property rights.
Well, you can't disprove that there is a magical
I can explain
leprechaun
why
in my
you
butt.
can't disprove it. I can explain why you can't.
Well,
disprove it.
no. Wait. You can't disprove that there is a magical leprechaun hiding in my butt, but that doesn't mean it's true. It doesn't mean it's a priori.
You cannot make an argument against property rights without getting into a logical contradiction. The reason
What?
why is to argue against property.
There are no
you
property
have
rights.
You have to pre-assume self-ownership to be able to
Nigger.
argue for first.
No, you don't need any kind of property rights or ownership rights. You can just say they're all imagined by humans. Like, there's no logical contradiction in that.
No, that would be the same as saying I'm dead, because that would be a contradiction.
No.
Yes, it is. It's a contradiction.
No. I don't have property rights doesn't mean I'm dead.
You don't have property rights? All right, sure. Why are you arguing with me right now?
Because potato. How does that refute my argument?
No, here's why. All right. Argumentation is a peaceful way of resolving conflict, right?
So?
Argumentation?
Argumentation
Oh.
is the only. In fact, it's the only peaceful way of resolving conflict.
Really?
You aren't saying okay, I'll argue with you for 5 minutes, but then I'm gonna kill you. No, we're arguing because that would be a threat. That wouldn't be an argument.
Wait, I'm lost. I'm totally lost here. So you said arguments against property rights entail a logical contradiction, something like that, right?
Yes, I'm getting. Like, this is a concept called argumentation ethics, proposed by a man named Hans Hermann Hoppe.
Yeah, but how does it entail that if I say there are no property rights or property rights are just an invention of the mind, how does that...
I was getting to that. So
Okay.
basically, so it starts with argumentation is a peaceful way of resolving conflict. So, all right, you are immediately, by engaging in an argument, you are choosing the preference for peace immediately, right? So,
I wouldn't go that far. I've been outside of bars.
Okay, but like if you're not threatening someone, if you're not being violent, you're choosing a preference for peace. So you are pre-assuming that person's right not to be harmed, right? And that pre-assumes they have to own themselves to be able to do that. And the reason why here is because everyone has a concept of property, all right? Communists have a concept of property, fascists have a concept of property, even thieves, robbers have a concept of property. For example, a thief would say, like, their concept of property, their theory is that the property should be mine. It should be mine. Now, that's not saying they don't believe in property, they just think it should be theirs. They think they should have governance over it, right? It's a theory, it's a crummy theory, but it is a theory. So innately, we all believe in we
Well,
all have this
you
belief
having
in-
a theory doesn't mean we all innately have this. So that there's a disconnect. Like you having a
No,
theory
and
doesn't.
no. Everyone has a theory of property. Everyone has a theory of property.
No, that doesn't. Even if everyone had a theory of property, again, that doesn't show that it's a priori or that it's true.
Okay, well, you can't. Okay, I'm gonna go through why you can't disprove it then if you don't believe that. All right. So,
Well, I mean, why? Even if I couldn't disprove it, the fact that I can't disprove something isn't evidence it's true.
by arguing, you pre-assume property rights. That's the point.
Well,
Like you
okay.
pre-assume it. You are
How does arguing pre-assume property rights?
because you have to assume self-ownership to argue,
No, I don't.
right?
No.
Yeah, I don't really think that does.
This is the transcendental argument for property rights. It's hilarious.
No.
Oh.
Well, yeah, transcendental arguments are arguments that you are things that must be true in order for you to make the argument. So it's like presup. It's what presup is doing.
Would you consider like a game of chess a type of argument?
Why do people jump into this chat and do that? I don't.
Stupid. Would you consider
What if I'm the only one that owns the chess pieces?
It's really funny. So a computer playing chess against you would somehow be assuming property rights of itself?
When did I say that? No.
No, you just said everybody who argues is like assuming property rights.
Yeah, I never said
Presupposing.
chess. Chess isn't an argument. What conflict are you resolving?
I said you're trying to win.
It's not a conflict you're trying to resolve. You're playing a game.
You're trying to see who's better at chess.
If you're trying to see if you're trying to see who's better at chess, and you have an argument, and basically it would be the talking about I'm better at chess, and then you say no, I'm better at chess. That would be the argument. Are you playing the game would actually be doing?
I specifically prefaced this line of questioning with would you consider playing a game of chess as a type of
No,
argument?
I just explained why it wasn't.
Well, it's analogous to it. But a computer can't presuppose ownership of itself.
No, but you're not having an argument with a computer.
It's analogous to an argument.
What are you talking about?
It's analogous to your argument.
I don't know what
Who's
analogous
believing in
means.
What the fuck is going on?
I don't know.
People trolling the channel.
Yeah, the people who are screaming the N-word are trying to rejoin and scream more N-words. Alexer scream the N-word with the yellow coat, and Froglegs scream the N-word.
Froglegs was doing a lot of that crap, and also Froglegs was bouncing in and out rapidly.
I mean, is my argument not?
There he goes again.
Not
It's
making sense
Alexer.
or something?
I explained why chess isn't an argument. No. Arguing
but
who is better over chess is an argument, but arguing like chess.
Like, when have you guys do jobs? Like admins of the server. You guys just
Yeah, there's two of them in here,
Hey,
but
so
they're
would I
asleep.
like maybe just take a second to breathe? I'm actually like currently detaining them, so thank you. Thank you for like
finally being useful.
Okay,
Man,
promise.
would be nice.
Maybe you mean you can always apply for mod if you think it's that bad.
I mean, it's really not that bad, you know. It's just when you have people like.
Well, there are a lot of people in this server.
Stop talking about it. The kids are still talking about it. Is why they're doing it. Just let her do her job. Shut the fuck up. Let the conversation continue.
Hey, TJump, I got one more question because I want to end the night on a positive note. I know you used to be a video game tester.
Yep.
What was the most frustrating, most annoying game you ever tested, and why?
Either Bakugan, Mad Carts, or the 3DS Princess game. I played, what's the Barbie Princess? I played Barbie Princess on the 3DS and I had to test that game.
Oh,
Jesus Christ! I can't.
That
even...
sounds like hell.
Where can I find your theory of morality? Like, where can I?
My YouTube channel.
Barbie Princess.
Yep, my YouTube channel has a whole playlist of my secular objective morality. I think is what it's called.
Okay. I have secular objective morality.
TJump, me and you
Can
go
I
sit down and talk.
is it possible for me to DM you a video on argumentation ethics?
Sure.
Yay. Okay, let me get the one by Tom Woods. Because that's the best one.
TJump, me and you to talk about old bad video games someday. Bible Adventures, Nintendo.
That shit slapped. I don't know what you're talking about. Here you go.
Yeah, it's the Bible. That's
Yo, Carpy Cat, you
it's
here?
God.
You would agree with me too if you tried playing that game, that it is not a good game.
Hey, TJump, would you say Christianity is harmful?
It can be, but it can also be beneficial. So it's not like 100% harmful. It does benefit many people's lives, and it was definitely evolutionarily beneficial and caused many benefits, more than the negatives throughout human past. But today there are other ideologies that are even better that would be
Like Taoism.
well, yeah, that would definitely be better. But I would say more like secular humanism. My model of morality would be better. Would be the best ones.
I actually consider myself an anti-humanist.
Let's destroy all humans. Humans are terrible.
No, well, it's not like the post-human idea of destroy all humans. It's more I'm favorable towards technology and techno-capital and the acceleration of the human race to a kind of to a kind of cybernetic singularity.
I saw where that was going.
I think that's
But
like
I can't say I disagree
I
either.
think that's more like post-human, not anti-human.
It's not. No, I just said it wasn't post. It's like humanism
just
is
unmute a troll?
basically humanism is the favorment of it basically like it's a favorment of humans. All right.
Well, I think most humanists would also include if we gained the ability to add technology to ourselves, since they're still human consciousnesses, we'd still value them. So I don't think it's specifically like humanism would grant that any alien species with intelligence, we'd also grant them value, or any animal that gained in human level intelligence, we'd grant them value. So humanism is more about granting value to anything that has human level intelligence or above. So humans are like the starting point.
Humans are actually bad. They're a problem, right? I think we need to completely become a new species.
So you are pro getting rid of all humans.
Well, yeah, in favor for becoming a new species, yeah.
Yeah, bro, 'cause that's totally possible.